Right.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen out there. This is a special meeting of the, of the planning board that we're doing in order to try to work on improving our process and engaging in more kind of big picture planning, things like that. Want to give real thanks to Andrew for meeting with John and me earlier to talk about this, and I hope everybody's going to feel that this is worth doing. I know we come out to meetings and it's a beautiful day and you might rather be barbecuing or something. I'm sure staff might prefer that too, but we thank you. Could I ask for approval of the agenda?
So move.
Second?
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, announcements.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. The announcement is here about keeping history above water. Unfortunately, that is sold out. I don't know if you saw that, but I think some of you are going, right? Judith, you're signed up.
Right.
I don't know who else is. I think Nat is.
I was for HTC, but I can't go for both days, and knowing that there's a wait list, I submitted so that someone on the wait list could go.
Okay.
Good for you.
So we'll do a follow-up. Those of us who are going, we can do a follow-up at a later time.
And I think Holly was involved in the planning, wasn't she? So we should thank her and whoever else
definitely.
helped with that.
Yep. And then the second is Leslie is away right now, but I will be doing her review. So if any of you have feedback that you want to give to me, if you want to use the form or not use the form, let me know. I'd like to get any of your comments by 5 o'clock Monday, July 1st.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm sorry, Andrew, that's for...
For Leslie Snow.
Leslie's annual
Oh,
performance
that's these
review.
guys. Okay, I didn't understand.
Yeah, since you all, interact with her quite a bit, and if you have specific things you want to tell me or not.
Us too?
You too.
Okay.
Yeah. You're here, you get to witness, so yeah, happy to hear from you.
Okay, so we have a list of great topics. Some may seem a little drier than others, but they're important, and I hope, I know Campbell, you sent some ideas on too, and others may have individually. Data compilations, we thank you for the ones we've been getting recently, and I think you've been posting those as well, but do you want to say a little about what we have been getting and whether, if anybody thinks there are things in addition that we should be trying to look at? This is quarterly, I believe, right?
Right, that's what we had set up, and I've been encouraging our staff to put together any data sets that I've heard directly from you. If there's others, or if you have any suggestions from what you've gotten, we're happy to sort of add that into the list. So we do, the EnerGov discussion that we've talked about, we'll have all kinds of more data that's more readily available. That is still at least 3 months or so off, but it is coming according to all my sources. So
right now, we've been getting, I think, building permits and also secondary and primary dwellings and trying to think.
tertiary, when they head
right.
to actual permitting, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So are there other things that anybody wants to raise as useful? Tracking?
Just in the question of secondary or tertiary, secondary really, but they've both been on our agenda sort of for discussion about annual town meeting and whether or not changes might be appropriate. So just looking forward, looking ahead to that possibility. On the secondary, do we have the data? Do we have data on use? In other words, I would go back to the question of on the secondary dwellings, how many of the secondary dwellings that are being approved are simply secondary dwellings for a homeowner, a second home, or guest house, as opposed to secondary dwelling for year-round resident? Can we?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to get. We'll try. we can run that through the tax assessor's records. I mean, there's a specific code for secondary dwellings, which are, I think they're 1090s, 1091s. And we can at least run those for local addresses. Otherwise, and then it's a matter of trying to put together whether there's year-round residents listed at those particular homes. We'll give it a go. I mean, I know that the data platform group has, they might be able to have looked at that a little bit closer, but
I think that's right, that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is supposed to get another report based on survey data later this summer. I'm not quite sure. I think it'll be more toward the end of the summer, but the survey's been out quite a while now. And it may be by having that data that some of the questions have to do with what size of units are people looking for? Are they looking for rental or purchase? Are they maybe there's some things about if they're elderly or some of those kinds of things. But I think that we might want to schedule, say, at a subsequent, if we have quarterly planning meetings, that might be a good thing to have them come and talk through with us. And there may be other data projects that they're doing for the town. Andrew, I don't know what those would be, but it may be the more data they have, the more they can put it together to sort certain things.
yeah, June 30th is their due date for their, basically the address project and that was running basically the known addresses from the street list and sort of matching that all up together. So June 30th, that will be coming out. Or let me put it another way. That's when their contract says it's due. So.
It also, on your broader point, Fritz, I think we'll be touching on that later because we talked about reviewing secondary dwelling policy as we think about the upcoming town meeting in the spring. So we'll maybe hold that and we'll come back to that some more.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else on that? I really appreciate that. I know that's also related to one of your some of us were at the NPEDC meeting and Andrew presented his yearly work plan that we talked about at the last meeting, and working with data once there's better electronic support for that is something, and plus you're going to be Mr. Census, so
That's right.
you're going to have more data than any human
yes.
could possibly want. But I think that's really important. I think the community will appreciate that too, to understand and be able to see what's going on. I think for the something I'm curious about, but there may not be an easy way to do it, is where the secondary dwellings are going in, if they tend to be in the more rural areas or if they tend to be more in infill situations. Because I know with the existing master plan, there was an effort to try to have more infill, and yet I know for many of the new construction projects that are out toward where I am or out in the Lug 2 or 3, many of those have secondary dwellings as of course. So I think if we're thinking about transportation dimensions or impacts or things, having, I don't know what kind of division, but you'll probably have census blocks in your mind too, engraved somewhere back there. So I don't presuppose how easy that is or where to do it, but if there's a way to do it, I think that might be worth our trying to learn about it.
Yeah, I think we can do that.
I'm sorry. Through you, Madam Chair. Andrew, is there a way, maybe in the initial application, to just have a side note or side addendum or something like that? So instead of trying to do a survey after the fact, in the application, just as a informative courtesy, what is this going to be used for? Whether it's going to be used for year-round housing or guest, not to take away any right from them, but just that would help to get the onset of the survey, and we'd have that information while the new application's coming in before we have to, get it later.
Good idea.
I'm a little hesitant. I mean, well, let me just talk about the first one. The location we can do because it's by map and parcel, so we can have that. We can get that data to you. That's not a problem. I think you all need to get this straightened out because the purpose part of the bylaw was added much later. It was not added as part of the original authorization for a second dwelling. That was put in 98. It was 20 or something years afterwards. And if someone puts on there, oh, it's the home for my grandmother, is that influencing whether you're approving it or not? I mean, your only reason for looking at second dwellings right now, your only reason is because there are two dwellings and you look at access. You are not approving this like a special permit or anything else. And until we change the bylaw, I would really caution you to not start straying into that area. It's outside of what your authority is.
Just for a point of interest, my suggestion was not to take away anyone's right,
Yep.
not to affect a vote, not to do anything going forward. It was clearly just for informative or informational gathering. So in that application, it's something, that's not a part of the application. It's a separate piece of paper just for information, data gathering. And then after you get that, file it somewhere else, and it doesn't go before the board. And you could even say it doesn't even come before us. That could be something later that you compile and let us know what you've learned.
We could do a survey of the second dwelling owners if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah,
That might be part of the master planning too. Dave?
Were you here when they changed the bylaw?
Yes.
And what was the thought process behind that?
There was concern by some of the planning board members that two dwellings were being rented out on the same property. There wasn't a presence of, a year-round owner or a seasonal owner in the property.
So it was basically restricting a little more?
It,
Or just change the language to allow that?
the language, I think maybe there was sort of an interest in making that change, but it never really got to that level because, again, that doesn't. There are some districts where second dwellings either aren't allowed, which is a moorland management district, or allowed by special permit, which is the limited districts, R5 and R10 limited, which allow you to put conditions on those. But that's where there's fundamental changes that are going to happen with second dwelling, or in how they're defined. The purpose, that particular purpose, which just listed principal purpose, is kind of not that effective. Do you see what I mean? Because there's others. A principal purpose is, but it's not the only one. So you're all going to have to give that some thought. I mean, we've talked at different times. I don't want to get off your agenda, Madam Chair, but when
please.
we get there, I mean, there have been talks about defining it differently. Like a second dwelling is defined differently in the town versus the country, or guest quarters, or there's other approaches. But that's where.
Well, and I asked about, say, accessory units and how they relate to these other things. So I think, Dave, that's going to be a topic that we probably will need to spend a fair amount of time on over the next several months. Hello, Matt. Good to see
Sorry
you.
I'm late.
No problem.
I had to
No,
drop the work
no.
off to somebody that couldn't come meet me.
So, no, we're happy to see you. Just apologize for starting. If we're okay with that, please, Steve.
So I guess I would just like to suggest, I want to back up to the building permit data for a second, but I'm going to wait. On the secondary dwellings, I think I would suggest that we need additional information to be making determinations, informed determinations. And what I mean by that is, well, for instance, let's use an area, a zone that has town sewer, so it's not limited by the septic. It's a larger size lot, has secondary dwellings, they're being approved, and maybe they're being rented out weekly. Well, I could see where a concern may be traffic. But I think there's zoning and building information that we can gather, but I don't know if the big data platform has it. But what's the revenue that's being brought to the town? What's the actual impact? Are they renting those homes out for the summer and you have a family that comes and they have 3 cars? Or are you renting it out and are they being rented out? And I'm not suggesting we get into this level. I'm just suggesting to make informed decisions, we need to have information that addresses what are the underlying uses in the different zones and what is the financial impact and the traffic, the community impact. So I just suggest you consider that. I'm not suggesting we do anything in particular, but in that discussion, I think it's a relevant metric. I'm not saying that it's the only one, but I do think it's one of the ones we don't want to be making decisions without having that. And then on the building department, on the building permit data, Andrew, can you tell me out of scope, is there a way to get a little more granularity out of that? It's a relatively big number. It came in, I'm using FY18 numbers, at about 6 million, and as an estimated cost of what the projects would be. So I'm just curious if there's an out of scope that we can break down into subcategories to get a better idea of what that means.
What is an out of scope?
I don't
please?
know.
Oh, okay.
Like a range, is that what you mean?
Yeah, well, like out of scope may be that it's like mixed residential. So it might be that I presume that out of scope means it's not a clean renovation. It's not only a shed. It's not only a pool cabana. There's something that's mixed and it's pulling it out of scope relative to reporting in the data report.
Okay.
And then the other thing I just wanted to comment on, it's kind of interesting. So based on these, the average cost reported for a new dwelling is on average just under $1 million. A pool spa cabana is just over $130,000. Residential rental, 182. And the one that got me was sheds, $197,000. So sheds we might want to look at. 'Cause
Well, if they're really sheds.
well, I mean, hey, the sheds that's a big number for a shed. So anyways, I just thought I'd share those numbers because they were interesting. But the out of scope was the curiosity, if there's a separate couple categories they might go into.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, our next topic is a favorite topic to many of us, which is why is it that the Postal Service has to send all the mail to Providence, Rhode Island before it comes back, and our citizens only get it 2 days before hearing, despite the hard efforts everybody's making to get it out to them, and what can we do about it?
Is that because it's bulk mailing?
No, I think it's the registered is different. Like if you send a letter, like I pay with checks to my credit cards, and I know right when they're gonna get there. I think if you've mailed the butters notices by regular mail without all the extra, it's faster.
It's faster.
But it's not legal, correct? It's just like this is Pony Express smoke signal stuff. It's weird.
Well, and then people,
I don't know how you fix it.
if they're working, they probably have to go pick it up because they probably don't just leave it for them either, right?
No, they don't. You've got to go.
It's like
out
being
and
served
sign
almost.
for it.
I
and
get
so
the notice
kind
about
of.
the house
Some people
move
don't
and-
like, get it and they're scared. They don't want to. They don't want to go pick it up. What do they do? You know?
Right.
It's like a sheriff thing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I will tell you, we were looking at the returned letters that were not picked up, and it is all local people.
Yeah.
All different.
Delivered like 4 or 5 times,
Yeah.
and then finally got returned. Or I'm getting certified mailings that were from last year that we're just getting back.
Wow.
There was a,
I have a quick question on that, just, because when you get the registered notice in your mailbox, right, you get a notice for it. Sometimes it doesn't tell you what the topic is, like.
Mostly
or
doesn't.
who it, yeah, or who it's from or whatever, and, while I haven't gotten them, in the winter I pick up mail for someone else, and they have gotten them, and I think, oh, it is important, and they're like, don't touch any of that. So, I'm just wondering if there's a way to put something on the registration
On the
delivery
envelope
card
or,
that says, town of Nantucket, or,
On the green card, for me, when I receive it, I put the file number, but it doesn't say like this is a public hearing for, it's only when they open that letter where it will state.
But it
But outside of the letter, we don't,
It does say
We've
planning
never had
board
to-
on the green piece
right,
though.
it says planning board.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
so it doesn't get into specifics, but it does indicate the public body.
But it's also their responsibility to open that letter and read it.
Or go to the post office.
know.
and get-
but it may be the receipt that the post office leaves doesn't say planning board on it.
Oh, I don't know. I don't believe it does. I think it's a little orange ticket because I've
Yeah,
gotten them. My
yeah.
neighbor did a special permit and You know, so we go out to figure out what's going on, or I just stop by the office and ask. But a lot of people don't follow through.
I know I get, the ones that I've gotten have HDC on them. I mean, at least I've seen that.
I'll sometimes put PB on the green card, but someone that's opening it doesn't know what that means.
But I think Judith is talking about with the one that the postman leaves to say, go
Right.
pick it
Right,
up.
yeah,
It doesn't tell you what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
I got one that was ultimately was about a house move coming by, but it had a company that I'd never heard of. So I Googled it and saw they were on the island. I had no idea what it was, but I had been, I really think people are working 2 jobs here or 3 jobs, and that to try to go and pick things up is part of the problem too.
We've gotten phone calls where people are like, well, we got a certified letter, but I don't know what it says. Can you tell me which department did it come from? It could
We did get that a lot.
Commission, HDC, I
Is
don't
there
know.
any way, excuse me, is there any way on the envelope, there's probably too much information, it's too difficult, but, you know, in the bottom left corner, putting public hearing.
It's time consuming,
Right, that's what I'm
especially when
saying,
we have
like, it's- we
16
could get a stamp.
new public hearings.
Hmm.
I mean, I have to ask some of my coworkers to help me so I can get them out on time.
Yeah,
Because some of them have a butters list of 40 or more.
200
oh, yeah,
for one application.
Certified is a local requirement?
It's probably state.
Gotta be state.
They're send local mail, I mean, and then, I mean, we do certified because it's important to have the receipt listed. You know, you've had these meetings where someone will say, I never got a notice, and it's like, well, here's your
Oh,
signature.
the piece
The
of
last
paper.
one, this
Yeah.
guy said we didn't, I
Like
never
a
sent
package.
any notice, and I whipped it
Yeah.
out, I was like, he signed it.
Right.
So, just one comment and one question, I guess. So, the question is, in the process, who provides, I mean, are they mailing labels, or are they just providing the address, name and address, and we have to actually do the
Yeah, to
label?
the tax office, they print them.
They pick up the labels from the assessors.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they actually get labels.
Yeah.
And then they give us the labels?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we attach the labels
And they pay
and
for
send
it.
them out, and they pay for it. Okay. And I guess the other comment that I had, which I think has already been answered, so in all of those cases where somebody said, oh, I never got the notice, we actually can tell whether they received, well, I shouldn't say, I won't say they never got the notice.
process
We can
happened.
tell whether they ever,
Picked it up.
Like I said, sometimes they don't pick them up.
yes, right.
And depending on, you know, they could be living in New York, but they're here, or they're here,
Yes,
and they're getting
right.
it somewhere else, or it's under a trust, so we're like, well, you gotta talk to the assessors. We don't make those changes.
Yeah, okay.
Or have your mail forwarded if you're away.
Because
or,
I think a
mean,
lot of people think that they're just, oh, I didn't get it because it didn't come in the regular mail.
Yeah.
But also, some of the mail doesn't get there for 3 weeks after the meeting has already happened. They'll receive their their registered mail afterwards.
but it's coming late.
And I had that personally happen to me. So I know what their experience, and when I got that, oh, that's good. Oh, I look, oh, the meeting happened last week. So it's nothing that we've done. We haven't. It's not that the staff hasn't put it out on time. They've put it out 3 weeks ago, but sometimes the mail doesn't get delivered.
If,
So we had talked about, could we move the cut date for submissions, say, earlier by a week to have 4 weeks or whatever it is to be processed? But when I hear you say people aren't picking it up, then
not gonna make a difference.
that's not going to fix it, is it?
What about a snail mail letter with a
addition?
registered letter? The snail mail letter's better. Or the email thing. I still think my idea about email is the best thing, but every address should have an email address. And see you
Not
later.
everybody wants to.
I know, but
yeah.
but
But
That's
legally, we'd
that's an
still have
input
to send the
item.
registered mail, Craig.
Yes.
What percentage comes back, you think? Is it more than half?
I mean, I'm getting stuff back from 5 months ago.
So it's hard to
6
really
months
say.
ago.
Do we have an idea of actually how many, the quantity of letters that go out every meeting? Or in anticipation of every meeting?
Probably Catherine has that tattooed on her arm.
Average of butters that I sent out for one is 60.
For one.
Yeah, and one can take a whole day.
For one application? Is that?
So
That's a lot of money.
I think I know the
When I have
answer,
16
but I'll ask
public
anyways.
hearings, it,
Right.
you know, I have to come in and finish it at night and like on the weekends.
600. So, but each of those, so even if you had, 60 on average and you had 20 out, 1,200, 50 cents, $600 each meeting, 600 a month times 12 months, $7,200 savings. If we were to add a regular letter along with the registered. So it would be an additional roughly 7,200 in worst case scenario with 60 envelopes.
We
Then
spend,
they would provide duplicate.
Yeah. So you would get, and we get this with IRS and Commonwealth and corporations. I'll get a certified registered return letter that I'd have to sign, but in addition, I would get a separate letter without so they do double.
Or maybe
So
the
the question is,
postcard would be cheaper.
yeah, but at least we would know that they got it, and it's an additional cost. That's what it boils down to. Probably between $5,000 and $7,000.
we had the 16 public hearings, it was like $8,000.
Yeah, that's registered. That's so I'm just saying.
Plus your
in
time, right?
addition,
But regular mail is 50 cents.
yeah,
so-
right. That's what I was saying. In addition,
I just wonder about the legal requirement, maybe it's a question that we can, turn to council for, because we're trying to protect ourselves to say, yes, you
Yep.
did receive notice, but if we know it's getting late, they're late, is that adequate protection? I do believe that there are some boards that just send out regular letters and that satisfies the legal requirement for notice. That's U.S. Postal Service.
but I don't think it's just for our protection and our liability, and I think it's actually to let the people that are butters have their fair chance to say. So
That's
we're
what
not.
he means.
Yeah,
Okay.
if we're saying
Yeah.
that
Talking
sending
about
out
the
just that
backlash.
50-cent stamp
Right.
is actually the best way to reach someone.
Right.
Fastest, least cost, and the cost is borne by the filer, but it's still least cost to them and easier for staff. Maybe it's time to reassess whether registered is serving an important purpose.
The other,
Certified.
I mean, is it legal to not do it, Andrew? That's what we got to find
Yeah,
out.
we'll look. I'll look into it.
Looked into that and I did.
Because it does make sense.
I do too. And there is case law about what is appropriate notice, and something like 1 or 2 days, I think, is the case where that was not appropriate notice. But again, the board, I've told you all before, and I'm going to repeat it again, you don't have to act the first night of your public hearing. You don't. You need to say, if there's a bunch of people, geez, I just got this, my neighbor,
Yeah, and
and you've
we've
done it
done that.
before. You've
Yeah.
continued it, and there's nothing wrong with that. To say, I think we need to let a little more time go by. We don't have to rush to get this done the first night. It's rare that a public hearing opens and closes and is decided that same night. It's unusual.
Steve,
can I ask, so when we send out the notice to the abutters, it typically includes the notice text from the newspaper?
Yes, same exact.
Okay, so, and I'm not suggesting one way or the other, but I'm just putting out there more for you, Andrew, if I may, through you, Madam Chair, because it's your workload. And I'm not suggesting the HTC way is a better way because that's the way the HTC does it, but I'm wondering if if the notice, the other part of this, bear with me, is that the notice needs to then be compiled and what comes in needs to be vetted by staff to determine that it's reasonably accurate before it goes out. So that causes, if you bring your permit in, let's say your special permit June 10th, your application, but staff simply, there's no way in how they can get to it for at least a week. And then it goes to notice and then they go out in the newspaper a week and a half or 2 weeks later, and then the hearing is in 2 weeks. So with that as the background, I'm just wondering, is there a way to vet a more simple explanation that goes out as notice that meets legal requirement, but also serves to notify the neighbors? Because if we could do something simpler like that, we could also alleviate the weight on staff, because what the HTC requirement is the applicant brings in proof, postal receipt, of having submitted each one of those to the abutters. So it takes it right out of staff's, if we can get over the hurdle of, does it meet not only the legal requirement, but the information we want to give out?
Yeah, I don't, and I think,
Can't do that.
Not for special permits. There's a specific process laid out for that.
Okay, well, I just wanted to ask because if we didn't,
And just so you're aware, that HDC process isn't always so.
no,
I've got lots of people that come in and say,
I'm not suggesting anything.
I just got it and it was 3 weeks ago. So
I'm not, I was just looking at the staff side of it too.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important to do that. But I wanted to ask you, because we don't get a chance to talk about this stuff, and you answered my question.
And on letters, our notices references the section of the bylaw and the waivers. I mean, it's a little bit more detailed than what HDC.
It's way more detailed. It's way more detailed.
I wonder also if there's, having a conversation with the Inky Mirror and saying, if we look at all the notices, they're sporadically placed throughout the paper. And I wonder, and I think this would be a good service to the community, if there was a town government section where not only do they constantly comment, they have Josh showing up at the meetings, and it's a hotbed. Everyone wants to talk about the planning board, the selectmen. If there was a section or a one page 6 and 7 that focused on the government and our selectmen meetings, our planning board meetings, our HCC meetings, and everything centered in a little pullout. We have that in real estate review. So if we had that in the town government section, we would be able to have their postings there, and everyone would kind of go to that instantly without reading through the hour or 2 hours of papers, and in the winter 15 minutes. But
My understanding is that they go by the space, the amount.
oh, I know,
how
yeah.
long.
But they would condition themselves to find that, because that would be a popular section, I think.
But I would guess that there are,
Yeah, one conversation, and I'd be happy to go to the editor and talk to her, see what kind of interest there would be about that. I just wanted to get a feel for, if you think that might be something worthy of discussion.
and I think that works for those people who subscribe to the newspaper and get it regularly.
Right.
Because
And read
if
the
you're getting a paper off island,
Yeah.
it doesn't come on Thursday.
Right. Well, you have online.
It doesn't always come on island on Thursday.
Well, but now with the computer, everyone's getting online subscriptions,
Yeah.
so they don't even have to wait for the hard copy.
All I'm saying is even if you do that, there are going to be a lot of people who are homeowners, don't live here in the wintertime, get notices. They may be traveling, whatever, and they're always going to say, I didn't get my notice.
Fritz?
I think we should do everything reasonably possible to make sure people get noticed. Because if somebody's doing something with their property and the neighbor has an opinion, they should be able to voice
Absolutely.
that opinion.
And I think what we're discussing is ways to improve.
I agree.
And if we add a few more people that would have normally not gotten to the meeting, that's helping. And the old saying was, you can please some of the people some of the times, but not all the people all the time.
Yeah.
This is the perfect example. We're always going to not please, no matter how much we try, and how we can send out overnight express mail for $16, and they'll still find a way to, I didn't get it.
No, I agree. There's going to be the person who always says, I didn't get the
Right.
notice,
Sure.
or whatever, and they got it, they just,
But any improvement
they threw it
is,
they threw it because it looked
Yeah.
like it was from the town.
Dave?
Well, I think the trick is to reach, people that are interested and that will read that section in the paper, will find it and read it. Those aren't the people that we're missing. We're missing the people that are working 3 jobs, are,
Oh, okay.
this is my feeling, I don't know, but that's what I feel. And so how do we reach them? And it might just be like.
But everybody is
said,
the
simply not
neighborhood
registered
watch.
mail, but another letter that accompanies it, because then they can't miss it. Registered mail, they have to make effort to get it.
What,
And the place doesn't open till like 11.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
Right.
people are in their day and over it by the time it opens.
Do you think there, if I don't know if anybody other than planning, but if there were a campaign to say register your email for better service, people might provide their email in order to get things electronically and save themselves the hassle? I mean, could we sell that, or
I think it's
you don't think so?
a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think it's a great idea.
With the emails, but
That doesn't mean they'll be accurate forever, because they change all the time, but
That
I
could be
think.
put into, my idea with that was to put it every year in your tax bill. The June bill, which is the next one we get now, is like the new, like,
Well, and it's like
You know,
when
for the
they
fiscal year.
do the voter
and do the reset.
the voter poll in, before the town meeting, so that won't get everybody, but if the street list is improved, I mean, that might be, part of what worries me is I think, I worry that people are turned off by government and aren't really making an effort to kind of join in with us in trying to make things better. So if there's low attendance at town meeting, or if there's a sense that, mistakenly, but a sense that the town isn't trying to get notice out. But if you've done something affirmative that might just be the cost of a postcard, tear off, so you send it to them and they tear off the back and send it back in. I don't know, on another point we'll come back to, Andrew and John and I talked about approaching the Civic League about whether we could talk about planning at their annual meeting, and they agreed that we could. So if we had such a thing, maybe they would help us collect or something like that. I mean, it just, I agree with Dave that it's a real hardship to try to go. It seems like the Postal Service, just the hours are harder and the problems are greater as time goes on. And but it seems important because it's not only do they actually get the notice, it's also do they believe that their government is really trying to meet them halfway and get them the notice. And despite our good efforts, that's not happening.
Just one. I like Nat's idea. I mean, I think in today's world, we all email things as opposed to doing it. So if there is a reservoir where, or a point where all of those email are available, then it seems to me that one thing we could do to help in the process without overloading staff is to require that the applicant provide proof of emailing to, and because that's easy enough. All you have to do is do a copy of an email with all the email addresses on it with the notice.
That could get into the spam box.
Well, it could. It could. I'm just trying to think of a way of getting the onus off of us.
Let me see who else wants to. I think we've generated enough ideas
Yeah.
that maybe what we need to do is hold this off to a subsequent meeting and then.
One other comment
yes,
on
please.
the letter format, actually interesting comment you made. I just suggest with respect to staff too, is having another letter can be cumbersome, although it's a good idea. So perhaps it's just as simple as it's a particular color postcard. So over the number of years that happen, people know they get a green card in the mail from the town. It's a planning board, and it just says on the other side, special permit or some other MCD or some other letter has been sent to you, certified mail. So you don't have to open it up. You look at it and you see the lettering on the back and you say, oh, I'm getting a letter about this. Because then it eliminates the staff having to deal with addressing a particular topic or a particular address. It eliminates that. It eliminates envelope stuffing. It eliminates all that. Just a simple postcard. If we go that route, I just wanted to mention that.
Another thing that is common in North Carolina, it may not work here because historic preservation might not like it, but we would traditionally put up like yellow or some color marker, put it on the site so people driving past it who are living nearby, if they haven't received, it is like redundant background that they're getting a mailing, but it would just have on the placard
On that particular lot?
on that lot with, there's going to be hearing on thus and such a date, which that means you got to go and put it in and take it out, but
I see another staff
gonna
position
do
on that, I'm just saying.
Yeah,
Well, they
know.
can just approve.
I think it's
those
cheaper with the
signs
stamp.
In principle, and
One
Right.
point to the
Yes, please.
postcard thing. I think that it's great that they just have to send you a list of all the abutters, but I think if the applicant takes a more active role and is responsible for sending out just a postcard notice. I like the idea of the postcard because it sort of alerts you right there. But, and then just has a record of that. Because one of the things I see not necessarily happening that Andrew had mentioned is the paper record for this has been sent, this has been received in a number of these things. I know you have to in your emails, you have a thing, click to click that you got it, or.
It
already
receives.
Right.
But I'm not, so that was one of the things that I was sort of thinking is important to keep track of, so that when people come and say that they didn't get something, maybe they just forgot that they signed it, or their wife signed their name, or husband signed the wife's name, or something.
I've also suggested with the applicants to reach out to the abutters, so that way I always so our meetings can go smoothly, so the abutters, are aware and we can get the meeting moving.
So then it wouldn't be too much maybe to ask them to actualize that and not just do it as a favor to you.
Well, how about if we hold this off to the next quarterly meeting, so there's time to do some more checking, and I also wonder, even if we can't fix all of it at once, if it would help at all with the staff burdens to push back the cutoff date by a week or something like that. That may not help, because time gets filled with who knows what, but anyway, I would just invite you. It was interesting discussion, a lot of ideas. I don't know if there's any silver bullet here, but I'm glad we talked about it, so thank you.
Can I just add
Yes, please.
just one quick question? So at a regular meeting, we send out the notices, they go out registered mail. On average, what would you say by the time of the meeting, how many of those are back that you know somebody actually got notice?
Varies,
10%?
doesn't it? It's always.
Varies.
Yeah, sometimes we get calls start coming in. I got the notice, so we know immediately
Yeah.
somebody got the notice. It's really, there's no,
No way to know.
not,
So but I was just, the only reason, and I don't want to take
Okay.
much time, but your comment was there's no reason why we have to act at it, at the next meeting. And I was just trying to think of, is there any indicator that tells us
That there's a
that maybe we should be
certain proportion or not.
well, typically it's the people in the audience.
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah.
I just think that, a little bit, when people are here in the audience telling you they didn't get the notice, they're here though.
Right.
They're here to give you their feedback.
Yeah.
So I would encourage you not to spend all kinds of time on that.
Yep.
They're here. Let's hear what you have to say. I feel worse for the people who come in
here.
and say, oh my God, there's already a decision. I didn't even know about it.
Yeah.
And that tends, no offense, but that tends to be the HDC at this moment more than the planning board.
Yeah, no, and I wasn't suggesting the HDC is I'm just was trying to throw in an idea.
No, I know, it's helpful.
Start another idea.
I've heard some helpful ideas I think that we could certainly work with. I like the idea of the stamp. I like the idea of the postcard. We're getting the mailing labels anyway, so another mailing label is not a big deal.
Just print them right up.
I could probably post, once the legal ad is finalized, I can post it in the planning board website.
Right.
People get alerts.
Right.
So,
Yep.
That's a good idea.
And maybe an FAQ about how to seek more, advance notice so you can register your emails. With the new survey that's going out, we ask for people's phone numbers. We can certainly ask for emails.
And we'll probably be doing more surveys for the master plan, so that's still a harvesting proposition and all, but it's still, is the census gonna ask for that?
For emails,
I thought I'd seen conflicting stuff about that, because,
you'll be able to do your census by going online. So I'm sure there's probably an email confirmation, and actually by phone as well.
Oh,
So those are
interesting.
two new things that
well,
are coming.
that shows the world's moving.
Right.
But that's not information we have access to.
No.
Okay, ready for the next topic. This is the exciting topic of approval not required, and as you recall, we often spend half an hour, maybe not that much every time, but so Andrew has some good ideas about how we might go at that to save some time at regular meetings.
Right, so what we talked about is that maybe on a revolving schedule, you regular members, we would have, a regular posted mini meeting of some kind where at least 3 of you would show up and get those things voted. We talked about, there's some that are just absolutely basic. If it's a public way, if it's a way that's already been approved, there's really not a bunch of room for discussion. other than maybe your general knowledge about what's happening. So the main sort of discretionary, I guess, call by the planning board comes down to roads that existed prior to the adoption of subdivision control, 1955 for Nantucket, sufficient widths, grades, and construction. So there might be some of those that get put before the full board, but, you know, as part of your regular agenda. But I think a lot of those A&Rs could be dealt with, you know, again, at a fairly, you know,
And we talked about.
regular small meeting.
Too, at some point, it might be that there's other kinds of things, like in certain instances, secondary or tertiaries. But we thought it'd be better to start with proof of concept, see it work, see that everybody's okay with it.
So I like this idea.
So it could be over a lunch hour to make
This
it
is a
easy.
way to have 1.25 meetings a month.
Right.
instead of
Exactly
2.
right. Yep.
I'm just saying 1.25.
We talked about,
Or-
What about 2FG, Andrew?
Yeah,
Because this room is going to get tighter.
Oh, for sure.
yeah.
And I mean, I'm just asking.
No,
'cause
good
that
idea.
room
Because
has-
and
you
no,
get everything works
hardly
in-
anybody comes to present these, right? I mean, it's mostly just staff. So I don't know what's
This isn't a
the
bad idea.
best time
came
to
up
do it,
with this
first thing in the morning or noontime or whatever. But it also, I always feel bad that we're keeping guys late, you know, after we worked all day. And if we can cut an hour or even half an hour off meeting, that's a good thing for everybody.
I'm just thinking about and bear with me for a minute.
Please.
This whole idea of having 2 meetings a month again has come up like periodically since we got rid of it, which was a long time ago, like 10 years. Like now, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Tom was here, right? Doesn't he, that guy, Tom? I think so. So this is a way to sort of kind of fix it a little bit without, you know what I mean? I
Right.
don't really think we should ever go to 2 for a whole bunch of reasons. And some of it was
That's
just
fair.
stated about, it's almost better to be busy to get to the month than busy 2 times a month.
Well,
You know what I'm
the
saying?
other thing that'll
But
be
I like this, and you
later
could
here.
put on a few other little piddlies, and also, Andrew, sometimes there's things like Form J's,
that's right.
and that like,
If people
what is
would
it
agree to
called?
that,
Withdrawal thing, previous
that's
plan.
I
allowing
wouldn't have
escrow
a-
to be tapped.
Yeah.
following
Get rid
maybe
of some of this
secondary,
stuff.
tertiary, but baby steps.
I just,
Start with
and we don't have to have everybody available, because I work around all these meetings. I don't want it to be twice a month for a real meeting, because my life would be even worse.
Well, the only
So-
thing we're otherwise want to get to later is to have a quarterly supplemental meeting. It might be months when NPDC doesn't meet or something,
Right.
but to really start working the master plan and so it might not have to even be more than 2 hours. I mean, so you're right about chopping it up, and
But I think,
we thought 3 people, right? So we wouldn't need all of us.
Rotate.
but we would, but we
Yeah.
also discussed having 3 revolving members, but also having it open to the
Oh, I don't
full
think there's any
board,
reason we
because
can't
there
have
are
full
going
board.
to be
It's just
times where
question of
someone can't
availability
make it.
doesn't affect
Yeah.
it,
Yeah,
is what I'm
it should be
saying.
open to all 5,
Yeah.
and then you might have 4, 3, 5.
That's
Right.
what I was thinking.
Yes.
So is everybody good
Yeah.
on that?
I don't have any problem. The question, I mean, Catherine knows, I mean, the only question I ever have on the A&Rs is just show me that it's a street.
Well,
That's all I want to know. Show me
like
it's a
Andrew
street.
said, if there's
Yeah.
any controversial
Right, that gets
pull-out
moved to
ones,
the main
they
meeting.
can stay
Right,
on the
we can
regular agenda.
pick that out.
So,
I like this
please.
idea.
Yep.
Andrew, how many times were you thinking you would do the mini meeting for the A&Rs? Like
Once a month.
Once a month.
So just a question to throw out there is, or a comment is, if there was a way to schedule it so it's maybe the week after the regular meeting, you could also capture signatures from
Oh,
members.
smart idea.
And then if there's a question or something that has to get held over, it would be able to go, there's not a public notice requirement,
No.
so it would be able to go to the regular meeting within the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, because there is a 21-day
Oh.
action period for A&Rs.
The ones that are
But if it were,
connected to
if it were
something
2 weeks
else.
after the regular meeting, it's probably too late for signatures, but if it's a week after, you might be able
Yep.
to capture some signatures. I just
Great.
noticed that on our agenda.
Good idea.
And this is good. This could
Okay.
happen, and this could be like, I don't want to say 4 o'clock, but like,
Yeah.
we could figure that out. But
Right.
like, Catherine sends out an email, we all respond who can be here, sort of like a special meeting.
Right.
But it's because it could randomly, work.
Sometimes you might have to abstain because of whatever reason.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, this
that-
is a good idea.
Just to nail the point you just made, Nat, so if we're trying to rotate this, it would seem like the idea would be to see who's available and then pick the three who've not served most recently, or some kind of, or pull names out of a hat. I don't know what, but I would leave that to you all to think about and be sure whatever it is legal.
Would it require a chairperson?
Three, if more people.
Yeah,
Sure.
there's no reason not to be able to have 4 or 5.
Right.
It's just,
Can't be up.
Right, yes,
Often it's all
yeah, no, that's what I said, of course.
it saves time
Saves you guys time.
for attorney stuff and people sitting here and all that.
And we'll still send you the agenda, so you can
Yeah.
still look at it, like you always do.
And if anyone has a question, if
And
Fritz has a question about one
you and I should try
A&R,
to
it should get
trade off
pulled
so
out
that-
for
Yes,
the regular
that's what I
meeting.
was saying.
Rotate, right.
You have a
That's it.
chair or a vice chair,
Fine.
Yeah,
yeah.
so, and we would try to trade off.
Well, no, we don't
And-
want to. No, the idea is not to have controversy on those ones. So any controversial ones, you just keep on our regular agenda.
Yeah.
That was
I-
the point.
And just to make sure you understand, I'm not questioning whether
Yeah, I
or
know.
not something, I just, it's a public way. And I said, well, why is it a public way?
No,
Just
like,
tell
for
me, is it
example,
1, 2, or
if
3? That's all I want to know.
Here's a
Just tell
good
me, is it
example.
1, 2, or
The
3?
mothball way thing would not have made it to our fluffy quarter meeting.
Right,
It would
right.
have
Yeah.
been to the regular one.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what I think
And-
you guys are trying to just,
And this group,
Fix it a little
whoever
bit.
meets, if there's anything like that, they can kick it over
Sure.
to the full
Yeah.
meeting.
Totally
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, in our meeting with you as the chair and John, we would identify those because, again, I think those are the ones that, really require more discussion.
Right.
and ones that are attached, like some of those real lot ones or something that has an A&R we can't vote on until the meeting and then we go back to it, those would have to stay on the regular agenda. Sometimes, right?
Unless they've already gone through, if the special permit has been voted and
Oh, okay.
appeal period is over,
Yeah.
again, that A&R is that's just routine. There's nothing.
Okay.
Does that require any kind of vote at this meeting right now?
No.
Okay,
No.
just notice.
What we'll do is we'll look at some dates and try to do some sort of rotating schedule and then let you all sort of react to it.
That's a
We
good
gotta
idea.
let the surveyors know that we've changed the due dates and
Yeah.
the deadlines.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah, and this doesn't have to be next month. I mean, if you need some lead time,
yeah.
that's,
But if it's going to be a week after, then you're actually giving them an extra week to get their paperwork and
If I could
surveys
suggest
together.
one other operational, just looking at this from the outside. You may just have on the every regular meeting agenda an item that says, attendees A&R meeting. And then everyone's here and you can say in 3 minutes,
Confirm.
oh, I can be there. And even if there's a list in advance, you can just say, oh, I have a conflict, I'm not gonna go, I'll go. And then that saves staff having to
pin a
track
statement.
down attendance and,
Good idea.
so that was just a suggestion.
We could
Okay.
call it a different kind of meeting. I don't want to say consent. I want to use another word. We're gonna come up with something.
How about fluffy?
The mini meeting.
The mini meeting. There you go.
Okay, the next one you'll like also, management of agenda items where the applicant submissions are incomplete or late. And I know we've seen things in Holly's workup often that says we're having to wait for this. This is not about citizen comments or any, this is about the applicant's own comments. You want to say something about that, Andrew?
Well, we had a long discussion about this, pretty much. And I think one of the points that I want to make is that, we're not advancing late or incomplete documents to this board. We're not doing that. So I don't want to, if I hear that, I want real examples of that, because I don't really feel that's happening. And I would hope you all as board members basically address that if it comes up. I'd like to see the example. I'd like to know what they're talking about, not generalities. There are times during the staff review process that there might be changes suggested, depending on input from abutters, input from our staff. So I think you really need to differentiate between something that's missing, not provided, or the natural progression of any sort of application to change based on time. And again, this is a little bit related to, you don't have to be in a rush to act on these things. If you want to see changes or changes are warranted, continue it for the changes and give the direction to the applicant or whoever. Or again, just if you need more time, if you hear a room full of people that say, you know, are raising certain issues and you've viewed the site but haven't thought about that, there's nothing wrong with saying, after hearing all this input from public, I need to go back with different eyes and look at this.
Yeah.
So again, you should not feel rushed to get those completed in one meeting. Not at all.
But
I think that
go ahead, sir.
from my point of view, the question of whether or not anything was later incomplete was more a question of, was that making it burdensome on the staff if something was coming in and then having to do things in a rush at the last minute?
Yep.
And so it was really more for the benefit of the staff to say, as far as we're concerned, you should have a rule. You know, the stuff's in by a certain time, and if it's not, it goes to the next meeting.
And that happens.
Okay.
We just had that. We had someone really badgering us saying, I have a closing and I have to have it on the next meeting. And it's like, but your application is 100% wrong and incomplete.
Yeah.
And the deadline is passed and the answer is no. So,
So we wondered, in fact, whether it would be helpful to have a formal vote of this board to say we recognize the discretion of staff to say no.
sure.
I think the discretion of staff is key, because we don't know what those details are,
Right.
and it's not really our business.
But
what
do
Andrew
you
just
think
said
that
is-
would be helpful to
Sure.
have? So can we vote that now?
Absolutely.
Anybody want to move that the staff has discretion to say no?
On application material submission?
If they believe
Yeah, right.
it's if they find it insufficiently ready to be advanced for board consideration. John,
I'll make that
I'll-
motion.
you second that?
I'll second that.
And Nat made it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
That way you can blame us.
Okay. Very clear.
I'm sorry, the board.
Let me call Nat.
When we were looking at the Starlight, and that night, he brought in the sound thing that was 10 or 15 pages and handed it out to us. Nobody had seen that, and for a lot, I tried to come up with a couple of questions based on, color and everything, but that's a big impact potentially in the downtown area. And I didn't really feel like we got sufficient time to figure out what all them pretty colors said,
Yep.
That red, yes, that's gonna. 'cause
So you would
some of the
say,
red-
But Andrew,
Continue.
yes.
I would say motion to continue, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
We
If it
can't-
was-
we don't have an opportunity to review this right here at the table.
But
If it was helpful and it helped us make a decision, if it was controversial and we needed more time, we would just ask for a continuance.
Well, I think that I sort of felt like it was a lot of information when you're looking at individual walls to try and figure out, because we had the people across the street that have the apartment, and of course they are downtown, so you can expect noise, that kind of thing. I'm just using that as an
Sure.
example of something that showed up second, and it was thick, and you really didn't have time.
I'll give you one that's really good for what you're talking about. So before we had Ed Pesci, I remember when Frank Spriggs said, "No, don't even bother reading that drainage report stuff. There's like all this stuff. It's like, what do you do with it?"
Right.
So the Ed Pesci report, which they pay for, by the way, the applicant pay for him to do that. You got a guy like Paul Santos, who I wouldn't question anything he says, but we got this other guy that sort of, it's like the second opinion, right? We didn't always have that. Now you don't have to read all that stuff. But something like the Starlight, I get what you're saying, but like that, that would be really hard to, you could have a whole meeting on sound and not know what you're talking about still. You know what I mean? Because it's so complicated. I think the location and the technical stuff in that definitely was confusing, but I think at the same time, I think they knew what they were doing, and you can sort of tell.
Well, we'll find
But in fairness though, the drainage thing is important because some of that stuff comes up, and with Ed's review helps us because we're not engineers. We're just people that are volunteering our time to be, sort of look that way sometimes, but you're not. You know what I mean? There's all these different kinds of ways to drainage and all that stuff, and that's why it's so helpful. But I get what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just trying to make a comparison to something where we have professional review, you know?
Just
So-
if I may, the concept of reaffirming the staff's ability to say no with respect to complete application versus getting into whether it's complete as a board and then having to determine criteria for that, I think is beneficial for the community, because we have examples where someone will come in with a kind of a site plan that they've drawn,
Yeah.
and it may be that they need a feeling of the board, it may be that they just don't have the wherewithal, the financial capacity, and they're getting a sense. So I think it's beneficial. I just applaud the fact that you didn't get into that side of it and you reaffirm staff, because staff is dealing with it on a regular basis, and they can kind of say, oh yeah, this makes sense to advance and to have a discussion on versus something otherwise. How you address the email, and I'm guilty of this at least once, coming in the day of the meeting. I've said it before, if it weren't for the last minute, I wouldn't get anything done. But the staff can't operate that way, and I think it's good that they have the ability to back off.
Well, and I'm hearing strong encouragement that we continue matters if we're in a situation that Andrew gave the background. I bet Nat could give us the background too, that sometimes in the past, if you said you wouldn't do it that way, some people wanted to review the stuff and others just didn't have time given their work schedule. So it seems like the best answer to that is continuance if it seems warranted.
I mean, then you have the other issue with all this is the timing. I mean, we know who these people are. I mean, we're living in a fishbowl. So they have this figured out in a lot of cases. They know, okay, this should make 3 meetings work. What if it doesn't? You know, I mean, who said closing before? I forgot who brought that up. A closing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it could be the time of year, like working downtown or off-island attorneys. You know, all these different things play into it. But I think that staffs, I mean, I want to give them as much authority as possible to get it right for us, because we only meet once a month. We're not going to have a special meeting unless it's some massive thing like the Dreamland stuff in the street that time or something like that, you know, that's causing a big problem. You know, but otherwise, I don't see it. So.
And I do think, Madam Chair, I mean, there are times when people come, you know, we can't prevent people from coming here, passing things out to you.
Yeah.
So you all have to, you know, sometimes if it's some
you
pictures
might
to
last
look
minute.
at, you know, that might be helpful. But if it's like, you know, 4-page of revised conditions that you haven't even had a chance to look at, I mean, you know, there were other boards that clearly, when that started happening, they were like, that's it, no, we're not, you know,
Well,
we're moving on.
It's also, if they're not sharing it, it's not just us, it's members of the public who might want to comment. It's thinking of one of our recent experiences, it's if somebody has a sublease or a lease and whether they're going to share it with the opposing counsel or whatever. And it's just, we don't need that game playing stuff. So. So the next item's really sort of related, time required for staff review and distribution of analysis. And this one is really just recognizing the volume of work and time demands and everything going into all that, whether we now get the reports Friday night for Monday meeting, we get the agendas prior to that. I know some of us still may not know every part of the island, so go out and do visit the site or things like that. And for members of the public, if they don't get the background, they aren't necessarily prepared to study it the way we would over the weekend, because that's kind of in our scope of obligation. But just as a topic to ask Andrew to comment on anything we can do there, again, not to beat on staff by any means, but to try to say, is it useful? I know now, Catherine, you and Holly, I think, have been sending us some documents earlier on, which is
big one.
really
Yeah,
helpful.
Public hearing applications, I just try to scan everything and send you.
And that's really helpful.
big
but-
stuff.
But
Yeah.
we just thought it would be useful to hear the group's views on that. Andrew, do you want to say more
Well,
preface?
yeah, I think one of the things we talked about is for the staff report to be more specific about, we need additional time to review this, right in the report. So that's clear. Sometimes it's sort of, at least in the reports I've seen, it leaves it up to you all
If the board's
without
inclined.
saying, that,
Yeah.
And I don't really know how to read that. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
If we're so inclined to that, then we should take more time on it.
So we thought we would change that to be more assertive, to say, there's specific things that we think need more review or more attention. We're going to lay those out.
Well,
So-
and I could think of examples about site plans, because sometimes Holly would reference site plans that need to be revised, and sometimes we basically leave that to staff to review before the permit issue. So if there's anything like that, to just cue us which way you'd prefer to have us proceed, that would be helpful. Yep.
Madam Chair, I'm just thinking, would it be beneficial or helpful to the staff if I maybe moved up the Friday deadline to a Wednesday deadline? And the reason being, if it's Wednesday and things do come in on a Thursday or Friday, we just voted to give staff discretion to allow that in. But also on a Wednesday, if you're having a full agenda where you have to get information out, I know that Catherine, Eleanor, I've known that they've worked on Saturday. And if they do go on Saturday, obviously the board isn't getting the full information, but also we're asking a town employee to work on a Saturday. And it's also reducing the time for a Monday meeting. So if there's something that has to, plans or things like that we have to review, working on a Saturday only gets us on a Monday morning, right before the meeting. And I just think, without putting a hard date of if you don't get by 12 o'clock on Wednesday, you're done. Wait another month. With that discretionary vote that we just gave you, that allows you to add those extra in. But people will get conditioned to really jump for that
We've told
Wednesday.
that, we'll get phone calls or an email saying, oh, we're bringing in an application, we're just waiting for this plan. Is it okay, so we can be on for this month's agenda?
But you have
Say,
the
okay,
discretion.
yes, however, if it's not in by Wednesday noon, you're not on the agenda.
Right. To say that and do that and follow through with that, that's great. And I think people would, we get a condition for the HTC. If we don't get it there by 12 on Friday, we're screwed for another month.
So would
People react to that. And if they want to get on that agenda, they do it.
should we pass another motion to that effect? Yep.
Can I just
Steve?
ask I get it, and I'm just wondering, is there a difference with respect to if the deadline, you're talking about supplemental, I guess I would suggest that you differentiate between supplemental information for the meeting on a Monday versus new application submissions for the next month. So if the deadline, what is the deadline, is the day of the meeting for new applications?
A month before, the next.
So it's the day.
For the special permits, and then, what is
And
it?
2 weeks before the A&Rs
Right.
and second volume.
I think we're
2 weeks
talking
before
about the
meeting, so
week,
it
the
gives us
run-up
enough
to the meeting.
review.
Yeah.
And if we need a new site plan, it gives enough time for the applicant to submit a new one.
So those dates would be okay, and what John, you're referring to is, if you've got something for Monday, the deadline is Wednesday at noon. Or
Correct.
Wednesday at 5 PM. Okay.
Right, correct.
Just wanted to make sure I understood.
Yes.
Because I think they're different, but that's great.
Do you feel like you want another motion to that effect, or you?
I think we're fine with the
Yeah.
earlier motion. I mean, I think the message is clear to us that you want to pay attention to these deadlines, and, we're going to be more strict with them.
I
is
think
really
the
what
staff
I'm hearing.
report, sort of fixing it a little bit, is important. That's a great tool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's new too,
It's
by
very-
the way.
oh, well,
Like
it's
a long
really
time
helpful.
ago, new, wow, but that's so good, because we don't know what you're thinking. We don't know all the details. Not going to every single house or every single piece of property for everything, So, is that good enough, Andrew? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Yep, I'm good.
Yeah. Okay.
Catherine, we want you to know we think about you.
Yeah.
We feel your
If you're
pain.
okay with it, we're
But
okay
are
with
you
it.
asking? Are we asking for the agenda to be like sent out on Thursday night instead of Friday? I mean, I'm not, is that what we want now or
Well,
no?
the agenda has to be posted 48 hours before the meeting. So
So-
it's posted Thursday.
So that's
Oh.
not going to
August the
change.
latest.
But I mean the, from you,
We're not
okay, all
asking
right.
for change, but we do commend you for sending us materials.
I like that
prior to
early
that.
material thing.
And I can
That's
also
good.
continue doing that with like all the other stuff, since now we have the 2-week deadline. So with the A&Rs and second drawings, I can send those to you too as draft only.
Yes.
Could I
Give
ask?
you guys enough time to review.
Yeah, I mean, I know it sounds kind of crazy to even say this, but like anything that's like an oddball thing, like a second curb cut. I've always said this: go look at the second curb cut yourself. Every one of them, they're all different. Every single one is different, especially the ones in town, like Mulberry Lane a couple years ago. Oh my God!
Yeah.
So that stuff is good to have if that's coming. You know what I mean? I don't mean to tell you what to, I don't care about the A&R stuff. I care about those weird ones that you want to go take a peek and see, what is this about? You know what I mean? That's all. But I
So
think,
it's kind of like heads up, right?
yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, one
Okay.
thing I do want to say about the staff, though, working on Saturdays or whatever, remember that it's not like, people work always a full week when they're working on
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
Saturday.
Right.
Make-
We are very generous to allow
Families.
flexibility.
And I appreciate it.
And some people really like the Saturdays,
Yeah.
Okay.
especially because they're not answering the phones and
Right.
getting interrupted.
Okay, good point.
Yeah. You get more
Real
done.
work day.
What's that?
It's a real
It's-
work day.
Well, yeah,
Less, you
absolutely.
get
Right.
more done.
In terms of getting work done.
And
Right.
and people ask, and they're allowed to juggle their schedule as long as we have coverage. So, but that's what
thing.
cross training of everybody. That's why that's so important. Because
That's
again,
good. It's just we don't want you to feel like you have to twist arms or something like that, because we owe you the backup to do what you think you
Sure.
need to do.
but we want to deliver. We got to deliver our product to you as
Right.
well. So,
I think that would be very helpful. I also think in terms of the things you send out early, if it's, I just want to surface this as a question. Going back to the discussion about what the community is aware of or whatever, is there a way to post like that stuff preliminarily on the town website, or is that a problem until the agenda is finalized? Because I know sometimes you change agendas and take
Yeah,
things
and not
off, or,
only that, but if we post something like that, sometimes the plans change.
uh-huh,
And then they have that application, and then they forget to go back and look at the final plan, and then they come to the meeting and they're like, well, this is what we had, this was what. was
okay.
listed."
I just didn't want to leave that up in the air without
No,
being
I-
clear about it.
You know, Holly and I have discussed that, like thinking maybe we can post a draft, but then it's like that brings in a lot of questions of people coming in, and she's trying to get her staff report done, and then we're chasing people to get an updated plan, or,
Right, okay.
yeah, that might lead to more.
yeah, it opens. a
Yeah,
lot of-
Confusion.
because then you'll have people pestering you for more and people contesting and, yeah, okay. Next one is thinking about the run-up to the master plan and policy discussions, say with town meeting proposals or work on things like secondary dwellings, wondering if we could have a quarterly meeting, try to keep it down in terms of how long it would run. I don't know if there's any benefit to have it be other than in the evening. I don't know, but I'm thinking more what I used to call work session, that is working, not formal hearing and all that kind of stuff. And I know it's tough to get this room, so it may be that has to go to fairgrounds unless, I mean, I don't assume anything about where it could be held, but since it's not a hearing, it might be upstairs or something. You want to go into that, Andrew?
Sure. I mean, we talked a little bit, and I think there was agreement from both of you officers that what we would do moving forward is probably continue with an in-house effort led by you all, led by you as the elected planning board members. So we would be, rolling up our sleeves on these particular items. I've included the master plan background information in your packet. Hopefully you've been able to look at that, what the 9 elements of the master plan are. I think since from what we've been talking about is at least transportation and open space are underway right now. We've typically used the long-term transportation plan as our transportation section. Same with the open space plan. The public interactive process is something that really needs some thought about. At the last master plan, we did surveys, we did quite a bit of outreach and testing of some of the warrant articles before we got to the master plan to see if people were ready for some of those changes. So again, those are things to think about in your policy level discussions. I believe that some of that earlier comprehensive plan effort went off the rails when it was not open any longer, and basically people started dropping out of that. And I've told you, Judith, and some of you who maybe have listened, is that that town meeting in 2001 was one of the most embarrassing, where every single thing was voted down, and I don't intend to be part of that. So
Worse than the government study one.
yeah, that was
And having been, I just kind of
Sure.
support, having been involved at that, I mean, I'll tell you, thinking back at it, I know it wasn't the case, but it seemed like the work group sessions were like every day for a month.
right.
And then all of a sudden, nothing really concrete came out of it when the rubber hit the road. And it was frustrating because you put a lot of time into it. And I think that I think Andrew hits the nail on the head in the specific in the generals, but there are ways to reach out. I think it's important that we do it, because otherwise, we actually just had a meeting earlier, we were talking about this with capital and other financial expenditures at the town. We need to engage people, we need to find out what people are ready for, and we need to be incorporating those, we need to be basing those decisions on our master plan and master plans that are going on. So as much as we can do that, I think it's important. And the only thing I just suggest, if it's gonna be like work group sessions, sometimes it might be nice to grab ship in the Dunkin' Donuts and a big jug of coffee and sit around for a couple hours and work charrette type stuff.
Right, sure.
So I
Good,
don't
good
know if
idea.
that's
No,
helpful to you, but-
I've been known to make blueberry scones even, so.
Scones, I thought it was just cookies.
But cookies with walnuts, I owe Matt big time. Well, the thought was maybe to ask, since it's a couple-year process, to invite Andrew and Leslie to think about how to chunk the cycle of work so that we commit to quarterly meetings, I'm sure the first one would have to be some of the nuts and bolts about working through what happens first, what the mechanism would be, what else is out there, what other data may be needed. And I think some of you know this, but Andrew's the lead on the census, so he's going to have all this other stuff happening early next year. So I think we really need to be attentive to that and be sure we pace ourselves. Maybe you want to jump down to the staffing issue. Does that make sense, Andrew?
Sure, yeah, since that,
This is F.
Oh,
right, and that's,
Okay. yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to get off your.
So they're related to each other.
But I think it's important, I think that the idea of having separate meetings where we can have these discussions is important, rather than trying to tack it on to our existing meetings. So I think that's really good. And in terms of F, I mean, we are searching again for the senior planner, the elusive senior planner that has been a vacancy since roughly 2012, I think now. So, and Judith, thank you. Judith has helped with some getting on the listserv and getting the word out.
I've got somebody from up in the mountains in North Carolina who's interested if he can talk his significant other into it and figure out how to pay for housing. So those are two possible big questions. But
so anyway, I think, we need that additional person to do the work in-house. I think it's doable. It involves your full participation when we get going with this. And but I think, to me, we had not good experiences with those master plan consultants. And I mean, Nat, you remember, I think, We went through
We're different.
two and
Once
three
again,
different
on
ones. and-
Nantucket, that's what the problem is.
Do you remember, you were
do.
involved with those
It's-
two?
And my takeaway at the end was, and actually it's what staff did, where you guys picked up the ball, was having a consultant that will actively engage action plans in the process of the planning, as opposed to, you all did that, from my recollection. You kind of like picked it up and said, okay, and here's the articles, not the initial 2001, but things, the roadmap to accomplishing the master plan after it's been approved. And I think it would be helpful for the community and for staff to engage a consultant who can take that on also. Because then we're having discussion amongst the community that this, in a way that is it's not invigorating, kind of a too strong word, but it's engaging them, and they're seeing that this is gonna happen over time, and we're actually working that out. And the benefit of that, I would suggest, is that it also helps other groups I see on your agenda here, like the select board, the finance committee, the capital committee, to get an understanding and work it into their longer term plans, so that the master plan informs strategic plans and other master plans and financial planning.
In that we learn what others are already doing.
Yeah, so it's that element of translating from the plan and incorporating the action, generally dates and timelines is really important. And I just remember that was kind of missing, and staff had to step in and really pick up that ball. And it's a lot of work. I know it sounds like it's not, but it is, because everything is so interrelated. And if we're engaging the other groups, the select board and the finance committee and Capcom and so on and so forth, that's a good way to work that into a real plan that then it can go to the voters, and then everybody's behind it, or they're not, but we know. So
But that brings in the other issue is area plans. When we
Right.
did them, it has to be done in the summer, because the people that paying all the bills that are affected in these neighborhoods aren't here, especially Tom Neves and Surfside were the two in Nantucket too. Well, Nantucket got a lot of stuff that was unrelated to what we typical growth things. It was more about Nantucket Marine. It was more about the height. There was different issues in Nantucket other than everywhere else. But because we have to talk about this area plan thing, and if we pull the trigger to get them sort of open again, there's a lot of staff time. Linda did a lot of this stuff on her own. She was really doing a lot of this, and it was like, we need somebody that's willing to deal with, like that Ed Fawcett guy, getting meetings at his house. We were meeting at his house all summer. It was unbelievable. Here I am going to another meeting. But those people matter. They're not voting, but that matters. The Tom Neves people, the issues that have happened out there in the past, the pizza parlor, and a couple of other things. The pizza parlor, oh my God. So
I mean, they did that without a bowling alley?
that might have been next. But
Do you believe that's a customary home
but
occupation?
again, how many people live out there year round versus seasonal? So that has to be taken into consideration as to how early we get started in March or something, where this stuff would have to,
Well-
have to have notices go out to people and figure out how to do that.
What would
So-
you think about even this summer? Because after we met, I wrote to the co-chairs of the Civic League, because
Yeah.
they collect all the resident associations, and they agreed to have us on the agenda at their meeting that's late August, but I don't know whether there's other member associations that, should we hold that off until we get up and running with the rest of this?
I'm not
or-
sure Andrew would have to.
Well, the area plan process we've done through the commission, just so we're clear
Right.
on that, not through the planning
But
board.
I'm
So,
bringing it up because it's part of the master plan.
yes,
It's technically.
yes.
Yeah.
And there are some areas that we haven't done yet, which, are part of the implementation schedule that we've adopted as part of the master plan. The
My comment.
Walwinet is still, has R1 5,000 square foot zoning out there. Our
makes it-
Quidnet still has R20 zoning, which is in the country area. Again, that doesn't really match. So, and some of those you can see some of those on the implementation schedule. So those are intensive, I can't do 3 and 4 of those at a time. I mean, those have to be, some of the ones that we've already done can maybe do a quick update on what,
Yes,
where they are, has
that's
anything
what I'm
changed?
thinking.
So we get them up to date, but some of these new areas that really do need the time. And I mean, we started and stopped in Quidnet. We did a partial in Wawinnet, but never have gotten that completed. But again, those are seasonal, definitely seasonal populations.
Yeah, in the
Those,
winter, there's like 6 or 8 of us in Quinnet,
Right.
so a lot of birds.
I mean, just throw out something. I mean, trying to reach people, seasonal people, they do come back for certain weekends. And I know a lot of the nonprofits, we will have board meetings on a Friday of a big weekend because we know that they're
attendance.
more likely to be coming back that
Yeah.
weekend. And I think if you've got it close to that weekend, Friday, whatever, and you tell them ahead of time, there's going to be an important meeting affecting your neighborhood on that date, then you've done about as much as you can to try to make it convenient for them to
Yep.
come to the meeting.
I sort of agree with that. I think the end of August is great, but there's a big clearing out
Right.
occurring
Yeah.
at the end of August
Well,
Yeah.
as well.
one thing I wondered is whether it would be good to try to get, I assume the Civic League has the different resident association dates, so we wouldn't have to do all of them, but we could have a standard set of handouts and stuff and just ask of them, could they identify a team of people we could stay in touch with over the winter, or tell them that this is for background, but we'll really be getting serious next year. I don't know. I don't want to be trying to do everything all at once, and it strikes me that I may be wrong on this, but I think some of the baseline master plan, apart from the individual locales, might be worth working on first before, if they're basically doing refreshers and not new projects, then at least we'd have some kind of baselines going about what the focus was going to be. We talked a little bit about how much the issues about resiliency and climate change and all that kind of thing is undoubtedly going to be very important looking out 10 or 20 years. So Nantucket, I'm sure, would have views on that in light of their experience, and that may not be the same for some of the others, but
I do want to put one idea in at least your new board members' heads, is we're not doing neighborhood-specific zoning districts. Not. So we went off the rails with the Sconset one, and that was a mistake. If we need to change like the village residential standards,
Yep. Has to be
that's what we
everywhere.
need to do, not start coming up with all kinds of new districts. It's impossible for
right.
our building inspector and everybody to keep track of all kinds of subtle little changes.
Which
We
are-
need to really start, I mean, that is going to be, that's a focus of the current master plan to reduce, do we need 7, 8 districts of 5,000 square foot lots? I don't really think so. So again, we need to, I want to caution you that I don't,
But Andrew, you
I'm
gotta
not going to be in favor of
gotta-
all kinds
You
of,
gotta explain to them where VR came from though, and then they'll understand what you're talking about. How we started. the
oh, well,
VR.
village residential was, again, looking at where our 20 existed out in the country areas
Right.
and adopting that
Cisco.
for the country. So again, if we have the same districts in the country and the town, then it's kind of a meaningless designation, isn't it?
Right.
It is, yeah, no, it
Right?
makes sense.
So-
And when water went to Nantucket, it was like this massive explosion of, oh my God. And Andrew already had this way to tweak the R20, especially in Longwood and some of those places, is the minute that water hit Nantucket, technically, you could add bedrooms because the separation between the well and the septic. And Andrew sort of came up with this way to fix the zoning first. Then it sort of, you add a little, but it wasn't like it was going to change Nantucket that much. And that was the whole height thing with the 25 feet.
Height is important. Again, a one-size-fits-all height doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, you can't do that.
So,
And zoning and ground cover, this is the idea of rewarding additive massing, which is historically what we've encountered, unless you're in a town or commercial, back in the 1860s commercial zone, there was no zoning, but that type of development
75%
is
ground cover.
lower spread out. So there may actually be, I would like to suggest that at some point in the master plan, that would be one of the topics that come up relative to the different areas. Because, for instance, I'm not suggesting this is the solution, but I just want to throw out there, it may be a reward system. You get 10% more ground coverage if you don't go over a certain height, or something along those lines, or a certain percentage is below a certain height. Anything that we can be doing that's a carrot to incentivize people to be building along their traditional lines versus what we're seeing, like I call it the overlook out on Ranger Road, which is on off Eel Point Road. I mean, it just, that's not
There's
a
two of them.
rule.
Well, you got Haddon's and
That's
there's
not
another
a
one.
rule development pattern, and I think that the master plan and zoning can coincide to work with things that the Historic District Commission, as an institutional body, has to wrestle with on behalf of the town, not the different people and the different personalities that come and go over the years. But the big picture is the master plan is not only the density, but what is it gonna look, in a way, what is it gonna look like? What's that environment, where the built environment gonna be like? The other thing I just wanted to ask, Andrew, is Nat mentioned the zoning changes and the height changes in Nantucket as kind of a way to control and direct, or maybe limit is too strong a word, steer when water came in. Are you envisioning that we're going to be doing that in areas in conjunction with, because we've got the sewer master plan that we're going to be implementing? So are you anticipating that we're going to try and coordinate to some extent the sewer master plan with the master plan, so that there's feedback? Because it will be a horrible
It's very
event
important.
if we come up with a master plan, but then the sewer plan completely or partially contradicts it in a way that can't be adopted. So I just wanted to ask if that was.
No, I know what you're saying, and I mean, I'm a member of the sewer master plan work group, just so you know. And I mean, some of our early changes, for example, all the 3M zoning changes, the Mizzen mass changes, were all done in anticipation that those were going to be receiving sewer. Remember, those were, and again, somehow that never gets talked about. I mean, those were RC2, 5,000 square feet, 40-foot frontage, 50% ground cover areas.
With 19,000 square foot lots.
Right.
Right, and if the sewer district had come there with that current zoning in place and expiring use restrictions, that would change that whole area. That's why those changes were implemented.
Yeah, and I get that. I mean, I know there are people who don't get it, who they see what they see now.
Yep.
And they think, oh, you're bringing sewer there, you're going to create density. And while that's maybe not untrue, it's not what it was. The zoning changes under the master plan have been put into place so that it's like the potential impacts are a fraction of what they could have been.
Correct.
I was thinking more along the lines of areas that we don't have a corresponding area plan, the sewer plans coming in. I just wanted to bring it up with respect to the long-term planning part of it. I know it's on your mind.
Well,
It's funny, you know what no one's ever mentioned, Andrew? That I have never heard this come up. All the sewer in Shimo with all that LUG1.
Yeah.
We're worried about Shimo now? I mean, you know what I mean? I just thought of it myself. I've never heard it said by anybody. All the sewer that's been, because I was just driving around in Shimo this last few days, and I see the little S posts all over the place.
Right. Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Those lots are going to be able to have more, technically more, because
Right.
they could.
But the master plan gives us an opportunity, perhaps, if it's accepted by the community, to address any of that type of growth by creating lower buildings. Look, the fact of the matter is on Nantucket, unless it's in a tight residential neighborhood, most of anything above the first floor, anything below the second floor, you don't see. So if we can encourage that type of additive massing, the visual experience of the built environment is lessened versus having these monstrous homes built and people then feel like there's more pressure on the community.
So you're saying
I'm not saying
give
hide
a
it.
bonus for not going to 30 feet.
I'm just suggesting that we consider these types of things in the plan and also tie that into, I know you're on the sewer master plan, but as a work group and then as a community so that there's buy-in, because the dollar numbers will also come later, right? So the sewer master plan is being developed, the master plan is being developed, but if we're not talking about them at the same time in a way with actionable goals worked in and timelines and cost elements, the rest of the community doesn't know about it. It doesn't get voted on that way. So if we're voting on it as I know we can't do it all.
Well, what we're doing, like we did the last time, is we're looking at what does current zoning allow.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's what the sewer is being planned for.
Right.
And then throughout that process, we monitored what were the changes. Land bank acquisition, there's way too much focus on, one little change that allows a few extra dwelling units here without acknowledging that all kinds of dwelling units have been removed over here.
I don't disagree with you.
And those are figures that we kept, were available, and, those were monitored. And even now, as we're going through this process, I mean, there are properties that put a conservation restriction on it. All of a sudden, a good example was Nancy Severin's property. That's in the sewer district, R10 zoning. And I think we can incorporate a lot of that into, potentially zoning changes, but the HDC, the HDC has tremendous authority over what it does and doesn't approve, as you know.
Yeah.
And massing is certainly within their powers to look at. So I'm all for, getting that sort of keyed in together, but I think there could be a lot more work done on that side.
Well, I don't disagree, and I would just suggest and so that's the other side of the room coming in and getting involved institutionally in that discussion. So there isn't this sense, wrongly or rightly, and I think probably more wrongly than rightly, that there has to be a division amongst the zoning and planning and the HDC. We can pull the rope in the same direction, but we need to talk about what the rope is, and there needs to be that, and then it needs to be institutionalized in a plan. So maybe part of the plan is how this goes to effect with the HDC and have board members involved.
I mean, as you know, sorry, Chair.
Please.
Yeah, I apologize.
No, fine.
I was hoping for this with the rewrite of Building with Nantucket in mind, and we're not even close to where we should be talking about, that document is great as a historical document for years ago. It has not been updated to reflect the emerging commercial areas that, were included in zoning. What's the plan for some of those areas? And, we haven't been we've tried, not for lack of trying, but I don't think there's been really a very good effort there at all.
So tying in to the master plan, I mean, I've actually tried to get involved and rewrite the guidebook as a organizational, or at least start to create the focus on it. And we've been marginally successful. Well, we haven't been successful with the rewrite. We've been successful with breaking things down into modules of topics and addressing them, so we have consistency among the commissioners on topics. The point I guess I was just going to suggest is that tying the guidebook in, I think it might even be beneficial that it hasn't happened yet for a couple of reasons. One is that as a result of the master plan, we can get that effort to correspond, or at least have complementary aspects to it without having to do a rewrite. And that thing was last rewritten in the 90, I don't remember the exact year. Been a long time. It's been talked about being rewritten for the last 15 years, and we're working on it. The other thing is I know we're looking at potentially some funding from an outside source, which would give substantial funds for rewriting the guidebook and related efforts to the tune of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then regular maintenance and update on an annual basis to the tunes of tens of thousands of dollars every year. So if that comes to fruition, so I just mentioned that because it's one part of our stool. If we're talking about zoning, the planning board isn't really just about zoning, it's about the built environment.
Right.
So I share that with you in case it's helpful.
Yeah.
Well, that, a lot to do here.
Well, Madam Chair, can I
yes,
just ask
please,
one
Dan.
thing? Okay, Andrew and Steve, I think the horse might slightly be out of the barn on a couple of those things.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I get your point, though, on the height versus ground cover, but, okay, Andrew, you hit on like my number one thing I have written down. How many, and this sort of brings up a little bit of what Ron Bamber's been doing in the last year or so, maybe year and a half. What was buildable before you started changing to making these tailored districts? That's what we used to call them, tailored districts. Just like less, but they're still commercial, but not crazy commercial, right? CN, CTEC is the best examples. How much was buildable if we just didn't do anything? Because there's a lot of people out there that think we made things denser. No.
Yeah.
There's some lug 2 to lug 1, which would have saved Surfside Crossing, so I don't even want to go there. I'm talking about the RC2, the RC, which we kind of forget about that, and then some of that crazy stuff down on Hulbert.
Yep.
And Easton Street, which was what, LC and RC? Crazy town stuff that was down there. But that's not ever talked about. So isn't Leslie working on, like, looking at some of that stuff? That's really hard. Don't you need to get Nate Porter to do that?
Yeah, some of that
That's
was,
complicated.
we
it's
did
good
include,
information.
I think, the zoning changes, and I did get a lot of positive feedback. That was included in the warrant. There was a chart in there. I don't know if did anyone see it?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
Especially when you look at the change of like RC2 zoning, which, 1,400 acres eliminated of that. I mean, that was the goal from the 2009 master plan, was to reduce that build out. And we've achieved that. There's no question about it.
And the people
So-
didn't lose. Because there was so much that they could do that they didn't really lose anything, except for some people that complain that I bought it.
There are still people
there
who
are
are
some,
who are angry
but not
about some
many.
of those zoning changes that
Yeah.
that
I lived in an
continue to hear
RC2 that was
from-
changed in
I know
R10 and
a
R.
couple of them.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would debate that wasn't
Right.
the best move.
That's your-
And
your
values
neighborhood, right.
skyrocketed. Or the value to protect that in that area quadrupled in value. So
You talking about business?
yeah, Pine Valley.
I wouldn't have thought of it that way.
I should have
well,
never
that's
moved
true.
off
It
Left
is
Road.
true. I know. I sold.
Sold
Okay.
that.
I didn't-
It's the value of those.
But I didn't think of it from that perspective. I'm just talking about, like, I was talking with somebody about this recently at a caretaker, and I said, we protected 20 years from now. You can't tell by just driving around that we did something. You never know. But 20 years from now, Ms. and Mast isn't A&Rs and 3M. They're all going to not be subdivided, but they might have a little bit more ground cover as a result of sewer or water at some point in 3M, but they're not going to be cutting them in half. It's just not going to be able to happen.
Look, I think it's clear the planning board has a marketing problem, and it's
really
marketing
bad.
what's been changed. And I think the master plan is an opportunity to bring that into a broader discussion
Yeah.
of what's been eliminated. And then I think people want to know that we have our guard up, that we're not just saying, and I don't think you are, but we're not just saying, well, this is all we've changed already. This is what we've eliminated from density or laundromats next to, whatever you could do in an RC or an RC2, which was pretty broad. But people want to also know that we're. being
I think
diligent.
I think people do want to know kind of what the future looks like
Right.
to the extent that it's possible to say. So I know you've talked a little bit
fast
about the viability of trying to do capacity study vis-a-vis what, or a build-out study vis-a-vis what, and it seems to me that may be something we want to talk about in connection with the master plan, not to try to hash that out tonight, but that I think that's in keeping both with what you said about history, but also if it's supposed to be future-looking, that's something people really will want to think about, because many people, their families want to stay here, but they're up against the cost of housing and all the rest, and we need to figure that out. So just to keep us moving along here, other things that might come up in a quarterly meeting, I wanted to be sure to ask for all of us to hear from Andrew about, are there initiatives the planning staff might have in mind that they would like to bring to us or to have us engage with? That's partly because we've been operating with really substantial monthly meetings with kind of the urgent taking the fore. But if we do these quarterly meetings, it'll be a chance to really look at some kinds of issues. So I don't know if you have particular things you want to raise, Andrew, but I think we should always be alert to that, and really want to thank Nat and the NPEDC for having invited Andrew to come up with a years-long plan that we could pay more attention to. And I know some of the alternates may not be aware of that, but I think we're all grateful for that opportunity to hear from you. I'm sure some of it may, we know there may be legislation passed and that may have a bearing, but there may be other things too.
Right, so, I
Talking
mean,
about the
I think,
bills in Boston now.
right, we talked about, at our pre-agenda meeting, we talked about the fact that, climate change, and I know is
Not the only
an
one.
issue
That's
that is
nuts.
going to be, I think, at the forefront of this particular plan. I think,
Money.
last time it was housing, and I think, we are on the verge of getting confirmed at least for 2 years of safe harbor. And I think, we have to wait and see how the census goes, but we may in fact, have reached our 10%, depending on what that final count says. But I think, and we have actually made our goal. It wasn't done year by year. Unfortunately, it's coming here at the end of the process. But our goal was 20 units per year over the life of the plan.
And it's not 6FG that's doing it.
Not
'Cause
right
it's
now.
not approved. That's what I'm
No.
saying. If we reach safe harbor for 2 years, what's doing that? Is that the new apartment?
It's Richmond. Richmond. Their
Has to be.
their local action units are approved. Their affordability has been signed off by the state. They are now, if you haven't been out there, there's building permits, and those buildings are they're coming in. So, and they're moving along here. So we hope to have those. I think they're talking maybe by the fall.
May I ask a question on that topic? So Andrew, I don't recollect, once they've been, the local action units have been approved, do they require an actual permit per unit, or is there a trigger that's a broader trigger that gets us the count we need? So it's not,
Yep. So local action units are by building permit.
okay,
The a 40B is by approval, and those units count until 1 year afterwards. If they have not received a building permit, they are no longer count.
gotcha.
So because the ZBA has approved Surfside Crossing at this point, we can put 15 units of that project before the state to request certification. So if they approve it, it's good for a year. So in the meantime, I think that, and we can amend this as progress continues, but we think that there will be enough units. Remember, all of the units, all of the rental units in Richmond count.
Richmond.
Yep.
And they're front loading, one more question if I may, they're front loading the development of the rental buildings, and then they're gonna do the single family and the duplex?
Correct.
So we get the benefit of having that at the beginning of the
The rental
process
units.
versus the end.
So all those modules that just showed up is for those?
Those are rentals,
Okay.
the rental modules, yeah. So again, I think, the climate, whether you believe it's man-made or, there's going to be some discussion about how we protect different areas of the town. Certainly the downtown area is likely to have a different approach than probably the more rural areas. But again, I think that's going to be a topic among the area plans, and
Joe Farrell owns property here now, just so you know.
well, and we've had this.
Reefs,
I think that I've been on the ocean plan for the NPDC, and I mean, we've talked about the sand mining, and that whole issue is something that has not moved forward.
Everywhere else except here.
Yep.
I just don't get it.
Well, but in the open space district working group, we've had Jeff Carlson with us too, and talking about things like where there's housing that's been flooded out and then people wanting to rebuild on the same site? Are there ways you could mitigate that? Are there things that, say in a watershed area, if you're trying to take care of the health of some of the ponds, whether you don't, I think currently the protection is right immediately around the pond, whereas if you model certain things, you may look at it more broadly. So there's a lot of different angles on that. I think-
Beyond FEMA,
Right.
beyond the district where you
Yeah,
gotta go
yeah.
8 feet up.
Right.
Yeah. Oh,
And-
that's easy to do.
And then
Yeah.
the conference that's later this week that is, I think, partly involving people from Newport, Rhode Island. I mean, the whole issue about what do you do with the historic practices and actual construction. Are you going to start letting or encouraging people to put stilts in, or whatever? I think there's
Waterproof
a lot of
foundation without all this crazy venting. It's all you gotta do is go up a foot. You don't have to go up far in the areas you're talking about.
Well,
I'm not talking about
I'm not
downtown.
assuming any particular area, but I think those are going to be questions that,
Yeah.
if this is a 20-year plan or even a 10-year plan, it also seems to me we need to be looking at it as a town as a whole, because otherwise we're going to be looking at like incremental pieces all around the island of proposals for seawalls or stuff like that.
I said that from the beginning, way
Yeah.
back in the day.
Well-
Weather doesn't know property
Or
lines.
people, wasn't it someplace off Old Hummock Road that they had,
They put the sheet
they
pile in.
buried the.
That was
yeah,
part of the engineering of that
yep,
project.
Yep, so it's just, we really need to be thinking ahead, and you're right too, that some of the engineering and the science and everything is still up in the air. I read a lot of Florida law to try to see what they're doing, because there's instances
Sand.
where, well, no, it seems
ships.
like if there's a, say, Pulpus Road is out near me, Pulpus Road got wiped out with a year ago when Sacagawea broke through. So, or I go by Folger Marsh every day. So, am I due to get a rowboat so I can get to the grocery store? Or, some of the Florida stuff that's about, does the town have an obligation to rebuild if people have done construction in a place that's vulnerable where they probably shouldn't have done it, even though they may comply with federal law? And I'll tell you, one county down there just about had to go bankrupt because they were being asked to rebuild roads repeatedly. So it's part of, I'm sure you all are capital
Yeah, I mean, the
folks must be looking
Nantucket
at
Bridge is a great example of it, and
Yes.
Sheep Pond, I mean, once that's gone, it's gone. But where you get washouts and then you're rebuilding your infrastructure based on particular storm events occurring on a periodic basis, I mean, it's an expensive venture. We do have, did I dream this? We do have a flood, I don't know what the name of it is, but in the zoning. I thought we had some prohibitions on areas that are in flood zones.
We
in terms
have-
of rebuilding.
Island perimeter zone, which is a little, is kind of
Yeah.
fallen out of favor, and whether it really is effective or not. I mean, there's FEMA references in our
That's
bylaw.
it.
Yeah.
Okay. The only reason I mentioned it was if it was what I was thinking of, it could be like something we could bootstrap off of.
Well,
along the lines of what you were
that's a
talking
good point. I also think that FEMA, I have a former colleague from North Carolina who's been very actively involved in insurance and hurricanes and all that kind of stuff. And I think at some point FEMA's bankrupt, so they're going to have to come up with, or they will be, if we see the levels of flooding and stuff with the intensified storms and everything. So we better have our heads on straight here, not just rely on FEMA.
Well, and the reauthorizations I think they're getting through Congress on a 6-month basis at this point.
Yeah,
Right.
they just passed
it's-
something, I think.
So it's interesting.
It's also interesting to note that some of the solutions will create other problems.
Right.
Like the height restrictions, HDC, you
Right.
go up 8 feet, whether you go up at 1 foot, that might eliminate a third floor with proper height. So we're gonna maybe solve one solution. It doesn't necessarily take away or add to any ground cover, so that's not affected, but when you go up, you're eliminating a whole floor sometimes.
I don't mean to be nettlesome, but I will suggest that in 1890, the storm came through and the reports were that you could not traverse Brant Point because it was flooded from the ocean to the corner of Easton and Beach Streets.
Before
This
cars.
isn't new.
No, it's not. And here's a simple one to look at. The coal foundations. I was in one the other day. It's amazing.
The foundation's
The
made of coal.
The coal. No. I call them the coal foundation. So when you had coal, it had to get delivered. And the ones with those side doors, like Youngie Holgate's house was the best example. Youngie Holgate's house, which got moved away, had a high foundation. It wasn't because of climate change, because they had to back the coal truck in or the coal horse or whatever they did. So they had those doors, but all those foundations were built higher. It doesn't matter where the house is. It could be out of town. It could be in a high spot.
That's very
And then
interesting.
once we went to the construction after coal, which is in the 30s, 20s, 30s, the foundations dropped down to the ground. Like, okay, downtown. So you've got these high ones, and then you got these low ones. And now we're going, all we had to do is go up 3 feet. We didn't need to go 8. But I'm just saying, that's what we've done. It's interesting when you look at them all, you can see the difference.
I don't want to get off the subject, but that the foundation height I always heard was because 100 years ago we didn't have heavy equipment that came into town, so you always built 4 feet higher, so you didn't have to dig 8 feet
Well,
down.
that could be part of
To
it.
that adds up.
But it was the deliverance. They had to deliver that coal.
Yeah.
And even if it's not true, it
I'm
sounds
going
good.
into
Right.
Well, to just bring us back here, I'm going to try to push along here a bit, but I would just say to Andrew, if there's any of those ideas that are perking with you, as I think of these quarterly meetings, I guess at least an hour should be going to master plan related stuff, and then it may be part of the time goes to your thinking about things. I think part of it probably should go to town meeting work, and I don't think there's time to go into all the details of that now, but I'm just gonna gently move us along.
Yeah, it's my fault.
on the things we had carried over from last year. Maybe you could reference that or anything else you're aware of going forward.
Sure, and the one thing too, I think policy, if you all are looking for at least survey input, from, I think you might all have your own policy ideas, but if you want to reach out like we've done in the past on what are we going to do with second dwellings, or the issue of the pools came up. I mean, we have a mailing going out in December, which is the mailing that goes out to reaffirm the voter list, and we've been able to use that before. But those questions will need to be developed, by September, by our next meeting. So if those are important or things that you want to start circulating out as part of your outreach for the upcoming town meeting season, that's to think about now, between now and our next meeting.
And I have to say, I thought I was working ahead of time because I was working in September and August last year, but that wasn't early enough.
Right.
So I'm a prime offender there, but maybe if we have a lighter monthly meeting and if we implement this ATN business, maybe we could have a half-hour
Sure.
discussion at maybe even the July meeting or the August meeting at least, because it takes time to develop survey questions as well. And I know you did, you've done pools at some prior time, right? If there's other models of things that you've used, you may want to kind of let us,
Sure.
chew us up on that. Secondary dwellings, I think a number of us have been thinking about that, so maybe the way to get that started would be to email you individually to just flesh that out a little bit. Are there other things that, Campbell, I know you had written a note that had a few other things. I don't know if they were for town meeting or if they were otherwise.
Town meeting.
Okay. Some of yours were about bike racks and other kinds of things, so
that was
that
more-
they probably don't require town meeting.
Well, I
That would be
prefer not
after.
to. I prefer not to.
Okay.
But I do think, and maybe it does have to become part of it, but it seems there's a big push to get alternate transportation going. And when I drive or would ride my bike into town, there's no place to put your bike. If they're on trees, they're on posts, they're leaning against each other. The ones at the top of Main Street that was out in front of Murray's, I mean, that thing would hold 30 bikes at one point, and they replaced it with maybe 5 loopy deals.
Yep.
That maybe, I've seen maybe 2 bikes on one of those. There had been a bike rack right around the corner of the Pacific going up Liberty Street, next to the Pacific Bank. There's nothing there.
Yes,
Well-
there is. They just put it there.
Okay, well, it
Just like 2 days ago.
would have to-
I got an email.
I
Well,
was just walking
and-
into town in the rain
Yeah.
the other day and it wasn't there, but more to the point is, okay, so Lola's, there were some people there that were looking to go in there, but they have no bike rack there. I just think that in some of these commercial spaces, if you have the ability to take your bike in and lock it safely and not have it jammed with 15 other bikes or scraping on a tree or falling down on a post or something, in a more organized fashion, I think people would really utilize their bikes. I mean, in the rain, people are only gonna go so far.
Well, and there may be also other ideas now that you're on the Bike and Pedestrian Committee as well. I know that,
Right, and I had just gotten on that, but I just wanted to bring it up because I've been making a point about it and I don't wanna seem completely insane, but I feel like we get a lot of head nods when I mentioned bike racks. Oh yes, we could incorporate that. But you never see it on a plan, you never see where is it going to be located? How many bicycles is it going to fit?
so that conceivably could be a bylaw proposal or something like
I
that.
think we should look at that with, especially downtown. I want to just touch on something. The hoopy things. The hoopy things don't
So
on,
that's their
on
patented
fences.
name.
The reason that you see less traditional bike racks like on Main Street, Federal Street, Center Street is because when there's one bike in a bike rack, it's like having a fence. You can't cross the street.
Right,
People
right.
walk between
I am
things.
totally
No, but
understand.
but here's one for you though you'll like. Now I'm going to tell you this, and you can get out and see it's actually true. So those hoopy things have 3 bolts. So that means that it can't be turned at 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. They have to be turned in weird ways. The ones they put next to the visitor service center to replace that crazy bike rack that had the bikes blocking the sidewalk at the visitor service center for years. They just blocked the sidewalk. Like, okay.
Oh, at Murray's
So they just put them
anyway.
there, but guess what? They're turned the same way. So the bike is still going to be out a little bit. And we looked at them. I was with Rob McNeil and we noticed this. And I'm like, oh my God, the bolts can't be made just horizontally. But you're right on that whole like commercial thing. Like we don't think about bike racks like we do some of the other sort of review things, you know. So
Well, and
I don't know.
Excuse me, for that 130 Pleasant Street, I had thought
Oh.
something like this. And not just for there, but it came to me through that process. That, maybe a bike rack in a commercial area, a bike rack that fits 10 bikes might take the place of a parking space. A parking space requirement. You couldn't do it for 5 parking spaces, but you could maybe do it for 1 parking space to give some flexibility or something. And I just really want to try and start thinking about it, because when you come off the boat, I think it says we're bicycle friendly. Just don't get on your bike.
That's a great sign.
I like that. That's a good one.
Well,
But park your moped in the street all
I
day.
do think that
that could be a topic.
people
Right.
riding everywhere, and downtown it's hard
Yeah.
to find a space for it. And I'm happy to research different types of bike things, because I get it, they take up quite a bit of space. But at the same time, they damage your trees, they take, people lock them on the benches so that you can't really sit on the benches downtown. Just something a little more organized. Because they're, you know, you're gonna put them wherever you can.
Maybe that's something for NPDC to also do a scan about topics they think
The
should
bike
be on.
committee too.
Yeah.
both.
Yeah, I know they were talking
mean-
about some bike storage behind town hall.
Yeah, there's
not-
the moped issue that I send pictures every day to all sorts of town officials, like, okay, this is 20 feet, 20 feet, 20 feet of parking on Nantucket at 200 grand a space. You know, what you're talking about, I just wish they would park mopeds the same way as bikes. Just
Well,
put them in different
exactly.
places. We have to use your brain. So what we have to do is strategically locate bollard bike racks versus bike racks. Like, we still need traditional bike racks like at the beaches, but not as many as we used to have downtown. They have to be strategically located. Like in front of where you used to get your beach sticker, that's the new bike. I guess I would call it a bike park. It's loads of bicycles there and mopeds where the
It's so
NERDA
nice to
office
be in
is
a
now.
place that has a fairly traditional bike rack that people can fit, and it overflows. And I'm
Well-
not saying that it's, some things, you know, I just wanted to sort of put it out there for
Yeah.
discussion.
I
for us to
nominate
think
that
about
too as a
before.
possible survey topic, because that might
If you
be
build
helpful.
it, they will come.
I mean, they're doing it. Wendy
I'm-
Schmidt was
I'm-
fine for a while. I don't know what happened with
okay.
that.
I
Yes.
wanted to address also, because I did it with the duplexes for the Boys and Girls Club. I think some of these rental units that are going in really ought to have either a shed roof or something where their renters could leave bikes protected.
How about, if you don't mind, I'm going to say, let's just have a session item on bikes of various sort,
That's
because
fine.
there may be other issues too. Is that okay?
Good.
No, it's helpful. I'm just wanting to be sure we keep our energy up for the rest of what we've got to do. Anything else anybody has on that? Otherwise, how we work with our fellow boards and coordinate with them. Thoughts on that? I know, did I see somewhere, Nat, that the select board and the NPDC may meet periodically, or did I dream that?
Well, that was part of the Novak report.
So we're,
I believe that one thing that we actually felt positive
It's on
about,
the agenda for the fall.
and some stuff with coordinated review, but that has nothing to do with this meeting. It's not on the agenda, but it was something that,
So it's a one-off rather than a kind of standing thing, because I would hope that with the master planning, we're going to need to do some
I think
intake from them.
to Steve kind of started saying something earlier, and excuse me, I didn't mean to say that. Capital, we're all having the same conversations that we're having here. How do we get something passed at town meeting? Do we have every single capital item be like one item? Like zoning is one zoning. It's not like we package zoning with like 3 different things in one article. There's a lot of negativity with that. I don't know if it costs more. I'm not sure if it's harder to do, but I don't know where we go with, like, we lose things. That's under 2 different. What's the other thing you have here? You have that in here somewhere. Meaningful proposals, right? Or whatever you said earlier, Judith, is. It's the same basic principle. We lost Newtown bike path. We lost the one that Andrew actually came up with, the one that made a drive a long time ago. I never even thought that there would ever be a sidewalk there or need it, but it does need it. And how do we fix this? It's social media, it's outreach, it's the survey thing, which I think is important. So I think that everyone sort of has the same feeling, Judith, on other boards. They're all talking about the same thing.
So what
So
does
how do
that
we do
lead
that?
us to?
Well, Matt?
Yeah,
So
please.
one of the things we're working on, like Capcom initiative is, I may have said this before, but it's called SIPs.
Yep.
S with a SIPs versus SIP-C with a capital
Yeah.
improvement plan. So it's strategic integrational planning sessions. And what we've done is we've broken it down into small work group for now, because it's simply unmanageable in a large group to try and even get a handle on it. It being what Nat was talking about, but primarily how town goals, long-term goals, the things that matter most to the community align with what we're doing every day and how that's being translated into planning in the master plan, HDC, sewer, transportation at the NPDDC, and most importantly, financial planning and getting the community's input so we know if we're going down the right track, or we get to town meeting or the ballot box and we thought we were doing something good and well, but it turns out we didn't get it through. So the idea was to try and focus on that initially as a small work group type of a thing, and Nat was invited as a member of Capcom, but as the chair of the NPDC. So it's the select board, the FinCom, Capcom, and NPDC meeting just to discuss the topic of this type of a planning work group, to try and come up with some ideas that can be reported to a larger group, and then the larger group there might be joint meetings to discuss and get an idea on, and then things get referred back to the smaller group. I love how government works. It takes forever. Things get referred back to the smaller group, and then we move forward. So I'm not saying it addresses all of your concerns, because you're talking about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and so on and so forth. The bigger plan is that this becomes an institutionalized way of planning. It becomes more matured, and all of the groups are involved in a way that's meaningful. It's a 3 to 10 year plan.
But what he's talking about affects our stuff too.
Yeah.
Okay, transportation mostly. I mean, zoning doesn't cost money, but when you see a roundabout tied in with something, are we gonna just have roundabout only articles versus sidewalks versus bike paths versus, whatever it is that has to go to the ballot box?
Personally, I think that would be worthwhile.
I knew you'd agree with that.
Well,
and I'm not saying I
that-
don't. I think we have to try something different.
I'm just saying that I think one of the things that helped get a favorable vote for the stop sign piece was detailing the cost of each thing. So that was the responses I got from people. And so, because they'd say, oh, $5 million rotary, and I'd try and say, oh, but there's sidewalks involved in that, and there are other things. And I think it would be worth a shot, and because you're bound to get some of those things through, and
I don't think you have a choice at this,
Well, that's
point.
right. I feel the same
I
way.
think that you're gonna have to try a different way to get these things through.
We could spend a lot of time talking about why things didn't get through town meeting. And there are lots of reasons. But I think what this gets at is coordination among the various commissions and boards, or at least understanding what other people are doing. Because I know, Justin, the experience in the last year with the planning commission and with this board, and all of a sudden I hear the select board just did this and somebody's else doing that.
Yeah.
I'm going, wait a minute, isn't that what we were looking at? So I'd maybe make a suggestion, Nat, that on the planning commission, we have representatives from the housing,
Everybody.
Concom,
much.
everybody.
Yep.
And what might be helpful is to actually put on the agenda a report from those representatives about what's going on.
Just a brief overview
Yeah.
of each meeting.
Yeah.
Something that's,
So we
Yeah.
can lend you, we just came up with a solution at Capcom.
Yeah,
So it's gonna be called our green sheet, and basically it's a tool for the liaison. In your instance, we have liaisons because it's a different structure where,
yeah, yeah.
they're appointed members of different boards. And it's a tool for them to come back with information from Capcom in this instance. It could be Affordable Housing Trust Fund, it could be somebody else. It's not to create a two-way communication, because that is, I think, a separate process. It's a tool for the person who's the appointee to not forget. It's so easy to forget. We get so busy, we got a packet of information, so on and so forth. So it's a very short set of information points to share from the work group Capcom to FinCom and the select board, their appointed member. Again, it's not a two-way thing, because then it also tends to abdicate the individuals on those boards watching the meetings if they don't attend and getting educated themselves. Well, it wasn't in your, we call it the green sheet. It wasn't in your green sheet. Well, no, we're not going to start a green sheet that's supposed to summarize
But you should have.
hours and hours of discussion, but it brings up the topic so that the other boards are aware of it. And then it gives everybody an opportunity to kind of loop back and say, call the chair or the vice chair, or ask Libby or Brian Turbert, or figure it out.
Yeah.
But it makes sure that the individuals are reporting to their groups.
Well,
So if
let's,
that's helpful, I think,
let's
yeah.
try to start that through NPDC if conceivable.
With this, I
that
think we
adds
have a really good
15
select board
minutes
right
or-
now, that they would be open to this anyway, because they're all sort of involved in, it's not like, I don't know how to say this, they're all engaged in different things that have to do with variety of, whether it's like, whether it's housing or whether it's transportation. The bike committee sort of helps with all this. I think it's good. I think we should do something, Andrew, with that. I just don't know exactly how to get that to happen, to make a joint meeting be like an official, okay, we're gonna do it such and such a date. I mean, the summertime's the best time because the selectmen only meet twice a month. So that's helpful, right? During the summer. How long does that go? Is that through August or through September?
It's through the beginning of September.
Okay. So maybe that's something that we could.
I agree with the joint meetings, but I'm just, a simpler process, that if you've got the four appointed
Right.
representatives, Matt's there from the select board. Matt should,
What's
we
happening?
should be asking Matt to say, Matt, what's the select board doing that relates to what we're doing? Or, are you thinking about these problems, or, are we aware of everything that might be under the
We
aspect
haven't even
of,
talked about
Yeah.
Harbor Place. It's been dormant for over a year, but something's going on.
Well-
I just don't know what, but something's gonna.
well, I mean,
Maybe as a board-
and housing and everything else. And it doesn't have to be an hour-long piece. It's just,
But maybe as a board, we should identify maybe 5 or 10 of the top topics of discussion, and then maybe have the chair and the vice chair attend an executive meeting, which we had done in the past. Libby
do
Gibson
that.
organized it. It wasn't a open meeting because we had two members, but department heads of the DPW, the sewer department. I think there was the selectmen. So there were a couple of peoples. But if we identify that, we can each state our top 5 reasons or topics, and we can cross-reference, said, wow, that's coming up on your list, and that's coming on your list. So obviously it's something that we all have a concern about, and that might spearhead a couple of identifiers.
yeah, it just seems, since we're on the commission, since we already have those appointed members,
Yeah.
it's easier than try to do it as the
Well,
planning board.
and then.
And since we all sit on,
If let's give it 6 months and
commission
see
anyways.
how it goes, and then come back if.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, I just say, I want to make sure everyone that I don't want to restrict you, but we all need to stay in our lanes on our particular boards, because even this discussion, we're partly in planning commission, partly,
Yeah.
I mean, the planning board in the past, there was a meeting with the chair and the vice chair that was sort of an informal meeting with the Board of Selectmen, which we could reinstitute that if there's interest. I mean, on the Planning Commission, I understand we have other opportunities to do, and I totally support that. But I want you to remember which board you're on, and not too much
Right.
in and out,
In-
crossing
in
over,
what role,
and,
right.
other boards have responsibilities, and I just want to make sure if we want to make
Well-
recommendations to the board, we can do that.
I think truly, I see something coming out of the master plan work. That'll be needful. It won't be make work. It won't be just pretense. It'll be important. So
Yep.
I suspect that could be part of what the rollout plan is, that we have to check in whether that's individual rep going to their meeting, whether it's some other kind of meeting. I know you briefed Libby anyway, but they need to have a stake in this too, so.
Right.
Okay, on that, next one is we have to get in there and sign everything that Catherine wants us to sign, right? Could you just tell us something about the rhythm of that? Because we may not all know when that happens, and the reasons
Well,
and,
as far as the decision, that's kind of, that varies, but as far as like A&Rs, we'd like to get those plans signed by the end of the week after the meeting, if we can. So Friday, they should be ready to be picked up by the surveyors.
So you get, go ahead, Fritz, I'm sorry.
Can we just suggest that you suggest to the board, to the planning board, by what day they should come in following a meeting to sign certain things? And it could be different dates for different things. But just tell us
Yeah,
on a regular basis what day you want to
emails out.
send.
It's just we send emails and like, we get the 3, sometimes 2 that are, we know that's gonna show up.
and she's not telling us who that is, so,
I just want to remind you guys, you're going to do a mini meeting
right,
A
for
week.
A&Rs.
after
Oh,
the
right.
regular meeting. And if
Sign
A&Rs
them
are
at
there,
those
they could
meetings.
be signed.
Sign there.
And
Yeah.
It's a week after the regular meeting, so if stuff's prepared, it could be signed. So that might
Yeah.
help to take some of that off.
It's going to be more the decisions, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the decisions where, and this is somewhat related to this. I hope we're getting to all of you, because I don't know if some of you are not using I know that some who are not using the town-sponsored email, we had issues with not getting
We
the
had
people
issues
like.
with those, so, yeah.
Just, you gotta use regular, and texting, I hate to say
can't get it on my
it's the
phone,
greatest
so
thing in the
I know
world.
everyone is having trouble
I
with
mean, I
it, so
just
it's.
drive by this
Do you,
office
do you want to
100 times a
jump
day.
down, do you want to jump down to that, Andrew, and
can't
then
set
we'll
it up
come
as an
back?
address
I
on the
think
phone?
we're about to hit ethics and open meetings, so do you want to do email first?
That's why I just,
Yeah, just to, are people using those or not?
It
Or you use
won't forward.
You use both?
Well, because I don't really write to anyone with my town, but I see all stuff you send comes through my town email.
No, you get sent both.
I probably
Yeah.
send
Yeah.
both,
Whatever you
but
guys
town's easier because it's not all cluttered with all the rest of my crap.
Well, not
Yeah,
only
I have no
that,
issue. You gotta get my
In
information.
terms of your open meeting law, it really streamlines where your communications are occurring
Yeah.
with the town, with anyone that has to do with the town. And then I try to use my other address when I'm just speaking to the town as a public person versus as a member of something. Right?
I haven't been using the town because it's very clunky and difficult to use, and it does
Something
not, you
expires.
can't forward it.
have to change
And
that.
it's, I
can't
know
even
what,
write anything, I don't know how to fill in the.
well, I know
Can't reply.
what it would be like if somebody wants to seize my phone and do a public records thing, but compared to dealing with the clunky email, I'll take that, which tells
I
you
feel
something.
exactly the same way as you do. The steamship one's the same way. They've.
It isn't that hard to have
expires. I have to call the
reasonable-
IT guy to fix it. I can't do this stuff.
And I couldn't
This is
actually
ridiculous.
load it to work with Outlook
No.
on even my desktop.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
So
Yeah,
it's
I think
like,
some of the
same with
programs
me,
didn't work
just doesn't,
for some
or on my
of us.
phone or anything.
and
So if you
guys
need
have a
any-
little bit, it's a little different. We don't sign as much, so.
if you need testimonials that they should fix the town
got
email.
that.
You got that, okay.
All right.
Stay with the regular.
Thank you.
If you can.
Okay, ethics and open meeting law.
I think hopefully you all got a reminder from
Yes,
Maureen
Maureen.
to.
And so
go
you have to
through
do
the-
the little signature thing
Yes, you do, and that issues
on the
of,
iPad. I can do it on an iPad. I gotta have someone help me do that.
okay.
Oh
If
my
anyone
God.
needs help with that,
No,
but that's
I
something.
Googled,
I think I usually print it out and sign it. Can I do that? And
Yes.
then get it to someone?
One thing we talked about, though, in reviewing prior to the meeting was, are there questions people like to have answered about open meetings or ethics or things like that? Last year they did, I don't know when town council does
Lauren
an
Goldberg.
overview of that. Again, I did a webinar for an hour and a half on open meetings when I became chair, but there's kind of idiosyncratic things like I didn't fully understand about whether talking to an alternate counts as a quorum or, some of those things. So if anybody has those questions, it would, I'm sure, make it a more engaging presentation the next time they do it if we identify what they are.
And if you guys have a pressing question, and this is on the ethics too, just Google it, mass.gov, and then open meeting law and the conflict of interest. And you'll find our webpage, and you can actually, if you don't know You can
can
actually
write 'em.
submit a specific question on a form, and they'll either call you or email you back. And I've used that a few times just to get a basic understanding when I didn't get it out of the big group meeting or the video that you
Right.
have to watch and then print your certificates. But just so you know, those resources are there, and they usually are pretty responsive.
I wonder when they do the training this time, I had conflict with affordable housing, I think, and they picked 2 days, not asking if you could come, if the town could video that, so we could
Oh, that's a good idea.
go back and look at it.
I know we're going to try to schedule another one. I just think it's worth mentioning again, just to reiterate, that 3 of you communicating by email on social media is a quorum. So you should not be doing that. Alternates can get basically relief from your appointing authority if you have things that you want, your personal items, like Steve, your personal home, you have every right to bring that forward and speak on it. But none of you have the right to represent any other board, any other nonprofit or something that you're on without getting, and you alternates have the ability to get a relief from your appointing authority. You have to do that in advance.
Yeah.
But elected people, you do not have that authority, and basically you shouldn't be doing it. And it's not just you. I mean, Nat knows there was a time when prior board members were engaged in not a real conversation, but 3 of them communicating outside of the meeting.
Wasn't thought of the same way it is now.
Right.
10 years ago, it wasn't like it is now.
And one of the things they clarified, just for your benefit, in case the email police come along, so you know, is, and I asked this because I had concern about it with another committee, is that a chain communication can count as 3. So it doesn't have to be one of you CC'd 2 people.
Yeah.
It can be one of the other next
all
person forwarded
linked
it to
into the
someone,
same
and then they forward it to someone else, and all of a sudden that's a quorum.
Yeah.
So I just mentioned it because it's topical.
I had, some time ago, it wasn't too long ago, we received an email, basically a reminder on, and I forget who it came from, but it was a reminder about what the requirements are for if you're or if you're recusing yourself. And I read it and I was a little confused because at the end, at one point it was suggesting that you completely leave the room. And so I think it would be helpful to maybe have a
Housekeeping.
a little,
Is that true? Have to do that.
Well, I think,
so at least
I
I-
follow that case law, and the idea, there's been cases, I don't know in Massachusetts, but the mayor sits in front and center, recuses himself, and makes faces at
oh,
threatening
yeah.
activities or what, so I think they're probably trying to.
I think all I'm suggesting is, I think it would be helpful if you take a look at that and do whatever you want to do, and then I think we should all be in agreement as to what we will do.
I think, as I understand it, I'm going to ask you to leave the room for what
Okay.
it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, just so we all do it consistently and in the same way.
And-
It's
and
about
not hesitate.
it's about
Come and get
signals, right? It's about signals. You know, again, if you're sitting in the front row and there's a tendency for the board members to, look and there's ways to communicate without
Sure.
speaking. So,
Sure.
and so in general, I think town council has consistently recommended that if there's an issue that you have a conflict on or feel that you can't vote on, you have a bias against it or whatever, you should, head on out, and then we'll get you afterwards.
Yeah, okay.
To get us.
Yeah.
I found there was a little bit of, because then at one point they were talking about, but you're free to actually stand up as a member of the public and talk about it. I'm going, well, how can you do that if you're supposed to be leaving the room? I mean,
Right.
I found it kind of confusing.
Yeah, you can always represent yourself. It's just your own person, like, again, your home, your personal interest. You're not supposed to
Or
go.
in like the pools, when I got up and it was
Yes,
my
that was-
thing. I got up and I was like any other citizen.
That's right.
Yeah.
But if we were reviewing a pool in particular,
If it were your pool.
You can
Well,
speak on it, but if it was a pool that you had an interest in, because for whatever reason.
My
then
neighbor's pool?
You would recuse.
Well, yeah, to say I represent all the people that don't like pools, it's like, no,
Right.
that's not, or, I represent Pools for Everyone Incorporated. No, you can't be here representing anyone but yourself
Yeah.
before the board.
Okay, so like I say, my suggestion is that simply, we all kind of agree as to what's the
but
procedure
that's
and how,
something-
what we do.
That's something that they should definitely cover in the training
Yeah,
this time, because it's clarifying.
I mean, you can use email, of course, to set schedules and check on availability. That's perfectly fine. It's when you start straying into discussion, that the rest of the board should all be able to participate in. That's when we get into a problem.
Okay, ready for the next item? This is a challenging and intriguing item, right, Andrew?
Yes, so there's some information in your packet about this L8 project, and
Page 29.
there was a meeting coming up on Wednesday at the community room. It does conflict a little with that discussion about keeping history above water. There's a map included, which is page 36. And the issue, this has been somewhat of a rolling issue here about there needs to be increased, I guess, capacity built into the electrical grid. And there's been a discussion, at least among department heads and others, that about possible routes for it. The original discussion included at least some discussion about underground. Is there an opportunity to do some undergrounding in these areas? The underground portion is something that I felt would be very positive, especially Orange Street, historical area, and the historic district, and through Pleasant Street, where again we're trying to get
Sidewalks.
trying to make that section in front of the Stop and Shop more villagey, and you've got gigantic poles going through and things blocking sidewalks and everything else. So where this has sort of landed is those items were just sort of dismissed, and we're now talking about an overhead route with bigger poles and taller things. And I think that, I've brought up at these meetings that at least our planning board policy is that, all new subdivisions, everything's underground. And we kind of hit this before where, about curbing and other things, that why wouldn't we have the same standards? So, where there's an opportunity to add capacity, why aren't we looking at this a little bit closer, like more of a corridor plan, or, maybe it does involve shifting some capital things around so it's more coordinated, or maybe this route is wrong if it's going to be all overhead, that it needs to be shifted to another area that it doesn't affect as much. But since you, the planning board, are certainly involved in these types of discussions, I'm hoping that you'll maybe weigh in on this, and maybe the message to National Grid or whoever's going to ultimately review this is that we slow down on this and do some more thoughtful examination of where this infrastructure should go before we start, slamming a bunch of poles in. I know that there's some other people, I know the staff has sort of expressed concern. I'm concerned about it myself. The HDC and Holly, who are very historic preservation minded, are concerned about this. And I think there's laws and other things that might be benefiting National Grid's position at the moment, but that doesn't mean, again, that higher ups can't take a look at this.
When are they talking about doing this?
I think they're pushing it probably for the fall sometime.
No, Angela, excuse me, I thought, my recollection is in the 2009 master plan that underground electric was supposed to be, and utilities was supposed to be the big push, because, we get one of those storms going,
Yep.
and one of those poles goes over, and anyway, I just remember at the time and storms previous to 2009. So I thought we had more standing because it was stated in the master plan, not just, gee, I don't like it, but it sort of says right here that that's our goal.
You're right. I think it said, I think it says where possible or where practical, you know, to encourage that. And again, when you look at our planning board rules and regulations, those are our rules and regulations.
That's usually a fresh
Right.
project.
Right. So Richmond, for example, is being built entirely with underground utilities, right? Just like most all subdivisions, I mean, have been built with underground utilities. And, you know, I agree it's complicated, but I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of complicated projects that are done for the right reason. I mean, in Providence, they, you know, pulled the whole highway out of the city. That wasn't easy. I don't think this is anywhere near that level of complication. And I think before we commit to, you know, higher telephone poles and other things, I mean, the town hasn't even had a chance to think about this. And you know,
Nobody even knows what this is unless you know what it is.
Yeah.
Have they done, they've not done an alternative analysis to line up underground as an alternative to this?
I'll speak on that.
Okay.
in a minute.
yeah, they have. But I think that, you know, there's been talk about what has happened in the core area. So remember, there was a project to underground the core area. The core area used to have overheads. And that's a totally separate project. There was a separate mechanism for financing, and that was slowed down because of the landlines. The number of landlines went down, and I think there's still 10 years to catch up with that, you know, that surcharge on landlines.
Yeah.
Is there an issue because of maybe easements, who owns what? My understanding is that the National Grid owns half of the telephone poles and Verizon owns the other half down. So who owns what, and how do we give up power or control over the?
Right, and that's that particular project, right? But this project, again, could have separate funding mechanisms. It could have other types of betterments. It could be, you know, it's something we haven't even had a chance to think about yet.
Steve, Fritz and then Steve.
I'm just looking at Gardner Street and what they've been doing on Gardner Street. I mean, those telephone poles and what's up there, those wires, I mean, that's a massive amount of electricity and
dangerous.
everything
It's
else.
dangerous in
Transformers,
storms.
houses are close together.
And they just put new poles right where the old ones were and drove through a sewer main too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Drove
And I'm
right through
saying
it.
there's got to be a better, if you need to upgrade and add power requirements, there's got to be a better way than doing it than just doubling the size of the telephone poles and putting massive amounts of wire up there. Reminded me of a year ago I went to Vietnam. If you ever go to Vietnam and Saigon and you look behind the streets, my God, it's just a mass of wires.
Your
because-
hair stands up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. It's a mass of wires. And all of a sudden I'm looking at Gardner Street and I'm saying, this is Saigon. You know?
I mean,
Steve and then Nat.
yeah.
Okay, so
sorry.
it's interesting because there has been a not inconsiderable amount of planning and resources dedicated to the underground aspect of this. I just suggest we keep in mind that sewer is aged out along this route. There are areas, various levels of age, disrepair, so on and so forth, that need to be replaced on a schedule. So I believe there's an incentive for the town. Well, I understand that, you know, workloads, capacity, and resources to complete projects that are ongoing or scheduled are probably beyond max in some instances, some departments, or just certain types of projects. The longer range goal would be to, and this is where we need to talk more between these different entities, public bodies. The longer range plan would be to integrate the expense that National Grid would be spending for excavation and piggybacking. Not so much that they're digging it in the same trench, but there's disruption. There's a cost in terms of community disruption. There's a cost in terms of the hardscape disruption. There's a big overlap there, but they're separate costs.
Yeah.
And they're cumulative. And to the extent that we can piggyback National Grid, we eliminate some of those costs, or at least we help to mitigate them. So there's that aspect of it. I think an important part to keep in mind is what Fritz was saying, which is the historical aspect, which I'll circle back to in a moment. The other thing is, we spent, it wasn't a great amount of time. We spent 8 hours at the hazard mitigation plan, but a lot of people dedicated time and understanding to coming up with goals for the community that have been put into a plan that the state is now we're looking for grant funding on. And that included as one of the primary goals, I can't remember which number it was, but it was in the top 10, I believe, which was undergrounding utilities, in particular strategic utilities. I don't know if we use those terms, but
Yeah.
this is also going to be power connection to the backup generator system that was approved 6 months or a year ago here at the planning board. So I think it's relevant discussion for us to be having. So in a way, this is a backbone. And to have it 45 feet in the air on, if we get a category 4, are going to be popsicle sticks, it's worth having the discussion in that regard. The other thing is that I think it's important to keep in mind, Andrew stated this, I'll draw a distinction between planning underground, which involved discussion of various boards and even our engineers and sewer department and water department. The community hasn't had, that didn't require a lot of community discussion and buy-in. And maybe the National Grid believes this doesn't require a lot of community discussion and buy-in because they're a utility. Because it was underground. And while there would be disruption, it would be happening to some extent one way or the other. But it would not be seen after the fact, where this is a National Historic Landmark. The Nantucket Historic District spans the whole island. And I believe that in part because of that, and in part of just because of what it is and how it looks, and in people's minds, we're paying the surcharge to have things buried, and there's a lack of understanding. And maybe there would be another surcharge, I'm not suggesting it, but the discussion hasn't been had as to how does doing this work in a way that benefits the community more than just allowing the provider, the transmission provider to bring service to us or help add resiliency. How does it benefit us as a community by approaching it some other way? And then what are those goals and how do we accomplish it? Financing mechanisms, scheduling mechanisms, so on and so forth. And then I think that the tool that may be utilized to, if there isn't a acceptance on the part of the utility, I think that the HDC, and we'll be bringing this is on the agenda tomorrow night, that was put on there, is the concept that this is within the National Historic Landmark and the HDC does have some say over it. I know within our zoning bylaw, it's specifically excluded for upgrades and replacements, but I think there is case law, at least it's been presented to our group at the commission, that indicates that while we cannot say no to something in a public utility or a public right of way, that we can weigh in on the materials in the visual presentation and effect. And I think that if we had some support in that regard, it might go a long way. I know there may be some hesitancy on the part of certain peoples or groups because of, they see that potentially this could bleed over into sidewalks and curbs and so on and so forth. I think it's the price we pay as a community, and we got to work together on these things. Really, the HDC's primary in the act is the preservation or the upkeep of the preservation and historic tourism for the economic benefit of the community. And if this is the precedent, which is these larger poles with these heavy-duty cables, and that's going to be what's going to not proliferate because it's for a specific backbone concept, but if it's going to be along the lines of what happens, I think we need to step in now and discuss it, or at least see if we can have a discussion. I'm not saying, we're ban the telephone poles, or I'm just saying, I believe as a member of this group and as a member of other groups, public bodies, that it's a worthwhile discussion. And it's a great example of why we need to be integrating our planning.
What is going to happen on Wednesday, the 26th?
So it's a meeting where National Grid is presenting, and it's an opportunity to express, I think, some concern if it's shared by you all. Judith, you've got it on your calendar,
I'm
right?
going to go, and when we're done discussing, I'm going to ask for a motion that says
Say,
that
we
can-
want to be
Yes.
able
I
to
can
have Judith or
express
whomever's
the
going to
views.
speak, and Nat,
Yeah.
maybe.
Is this posted for us? There's a meeting? No.
No.
No, but if
Two
there's
of them,
only
two
two of
members
us.
go.
But I think you wanted clear that they have the
sold out.
authority to speak as chair of the planning board or as chair of the planning commission, not simply,
Right.
this is my view.
I agree.
Matt, did you want to say?
I don't know
Is the
what we
meeting
need to
here,
do to
Andrew?
allow
Is
that.
it here?
Yeah. I
Part of the
just
selectmen?
want to let, I'm taking
sold out
notes.
at the public.
I don't understand.
The meeting's here at 6
It's-
o'clock on
it's-
Wednesday.
Keeping History Above Water is sold out,
Right.
not the other one.
Oh.
Okay.
We're talking about the feeder thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's not sold out.
No.
Oh, my God.
No, if there is,
There's a conflict if you were going to the.
Okay.
it's the
Alright.
speaker.
I was talking about the National Grid meeting.
No, I know. Yes, that's the one we
Nat,
were
did you
talking
want to
about.
speak to the merits?
No, I
did.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just fine. I mean, I'm going to the meeting Wednesday. What,
6
this,
o'clock.
we need
So
to do
if I
this.
go to
I
the
don't care
meeting-
what it takes. I don't care what.
Just
it
don't
makes no
sit,
sense
don't
to-
sit
to not
together
do
is all.
this.
Can I get a
I was
clarification?
just gonna go with
crazy.
I mean, I planned to go before I heard about it here, but I was just gonna go as a citizen and see.
I
if
think
they
that's
did-
an exception to open meetings if,
As long as you're not discussing it amongst yourself
Yeah,
or,
or
you
sitting
know.
together.
They
Sitting
don't
next
sit
to each
together.
We sit way across
Yeah.
sometimes at these
So
things.
can I just get a clarification from Nat?
if I can just keep, I've got a queue here of folks. Nat, did you
No,
want to
I'm-
speak
I'm
to them?
fine.
Okay, John?
Yeah, I just had just a comment. I do remember when we had the downtown sewer.
Phase one, phase two,
Yes.
yep.
And I remember David Gregg was saying that any kind of improvements that were going to be done, there will be an open discussion with other bodies
That's
such
since
as the.
Prospect Street.
Yeah, so want to comment water or
Yeah.
DPW saying, hey, we've got this project going in. Is there any way we can piggyback and coordinate if you've got a project to implement that? And I would say to just expand that, going and talking to the powers that be from National Grid and the Verizon and Comcast, because if our department heads are working together, if they're opening up a road, maybe there's a chance that the other private industries such as the Comcast, and they can piggyback on an open road so that we're not digging up 2 years from now to lay new cable or something when really we just put a brand new sewer in there and that was the time to do it. That's my only comment.
Steve?
So that's what I just wanted to, now I want to clarify, when you say you're fine, you mean this needs to be addressed in
Yeah,
terms of.
I mean, I'm fine. I don't
underground.
want to talk all night.
I got you.
Because I think we understand enough,
Right.
but we don't know everything about this.
Right.
I heard that there's been some pushback because they don't want to block the road or we don't want to do this. This is too complicated. But it's like, but if we have sewer stuff to do, we have water stuff to
Right.
do.
We're doing it
What are
anyways.
we not doing?
Yeah.
this
And we're
for?
saving
That's
money.
absurd.
Yeah, and we're saving
And
money.
inconvenience, exactly.
And the trees
Yeah.
on Pleasant Street are huge.
Yeah.
And the sidewalk, the curbing, there's all sorts of issues where it gets tight. And then we have the land, as Andrew talked about, I didn't know the feeder project was going beyond. So this is gonna go right past Stop and Shop, all the way.
Out to the Rotary.
And it's an opportunity to fix one of our mistakes with Stop and Shop, not getting those bump outs. They shouldn't have put those poles like that. We just didn't think of all that stuff.
It's a good opportunity to have the discussion of why underground is a community, but just to be clear, I just want to clarify one thing and then underground is a discussion that's been going on for well.
I know, it's old. This is
I
2
mean,
years.
This is 2 years,
Yeah.
and it's not been like, let's talk
right.
about it, and then we'll go have another meeting in a couple of months.
No, this
Like, this has
project's
been discussed
Yeah.
in depth, and money's been spent, and resources have been applied. So I think the town has a vested interest in a variety of ways. But I wanted you to be clear on the history.
This
So
is
you don't think
25
it's-
years.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
when I
yeah.
moved here in '94, the first road they started on was the business that I bought on Oak Street,
Well, I mean,
and
this
then it came to a
specific
halt.
route- This specific route has been under discussion as an underground
Yeah.
with the town. I believe our town representatives working in good faith to try and get this underground. I think that they need to have some support and understand that it may be complicated, but it's worth doing. That's all I'm trying. I just want to have the history on this specific area. 'Cause it's
But I don't want to be, I think we have a tendency to be adversarial to like National Grid or
Yeah.
carp or somebody else. No, it's just natural for us. We need to work with them.
Yeah.
And get this done. I mean, that's my feeling.
Yeah, I'm
I
with
mean,
you.
whatever it takes it should be getting done.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think that it's not realistic to think they're just going to pay to put it all underground. That, if anyone's thinking that,
No.
get that out of your head. We're going to have to probably, if it's something we want to do as a community, and I think we should have that discussion, we probably going to have to come up with some of the resources and certainly a lot of the planning and scheduling and everything that you were talking about.
When those trucks come here and go to the fairgrounds, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Those utility, when there's going to be a storm, but it never happens, and there's like 10 of them trucks back there. When you have a chance to get rid of those big, huge trees at Prospect Street, on Pleasant Street, where the wires are all inside the trees, like, hello. You know, you would think this would be it wouldn't even be a question. And Pleasant Street can be closed. If we can close Prospect Street, like we did for that water project and never fix anything else, we can certainly close Pleasant in pieces, because you can bounce in and out of all those feeder streets and get to where you need to go. It's not impossible.
There'd be a lot of public support
Sure there would.
for that move, for any capital thing at town meeting next year.
Well, that was part of our thing today, right?
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't actually, but I heard Rob talk to me about this, that the money that we think we have in this like kitty with them is
talking about
not
the
really true.
surcharge, yeah.
This is gonna be,
But a discussion
it.
may bring up topics that come with
We'll give
solutions
you,
about other
we'll give you
surcharges
a
or other.
report back for sure.
Yeah.
Fritz, did you have something else to say?
No, I just,
Okay.
as long as it's clear that you're authorized to speak
We need to make a
How about
on
motion.
behalf of,
Yes.
you're authorized to speak as the chair of the, or vice chair of the planning board. As
Are you
opposed
making
to,
the motion?
yeah, I'll make a motion that, are you, both of you gonna go?
speak as a citizen.
The chair and the vice
Nat's
chair.
going to
Yeah.
speak as planning board, and I take it that Nat's going to speak as NPDC.
Nat Lowell.
Well,
Yeah,
Our
I'll speak
beloved
as
brethren,
whoever,
I'll make a motion to support Judith to speak on behalf of the planning board at the National Grid meeting Wednesday, June 26, 6 o'clock p.m. here at Fort
Express
Fairgrounds.
views as discussed tonight.
And
Aren't you
expressive
going to
views
the
as
water
discussed.
thing? Aren't you
But
going-
isn't that Thursday? The water thing's Thursday.
There's a nighttime, I think,
There's a-
cocktail party or something.
Oh, okay.
There's a reception.
Before the flood comes, cocktail party.
And if I can call you to order can we vote on this?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Oh, aye.
John
Made the
seconded.
motion. Fritz
Made the
seconded.
motion, Fritz second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Yes, we're all together on that. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Let's see where we are. That was lively and very helpful for the history and the context. We'll try to
And be very forceful.
and good-natured also.
Be very forceful.
And good-natured. I got that part.
At the same time.
Master Plan 2009 update of implementation.
Page 38 of your packet, I've suggested some alternative dates, which are in the margins. So basically, the implementation schedule for the phase out of RC was originally going to be 2020 next year. I'd like to move that to 2024. And the reason is we still have Harbor Place, we have the Marine Home Center property,
only a
and we
few
need
places
some more
in that
discussions about that.
So that's 2024.
Which one are we doing?
Yeah, so change that from 2020 to
This is
2024,
RC.
which is
Oh, RC.
consistent with the RC2.
And that's a realistic number, Andrew, considering how slow pace this is going down there.
Yes,
You know,
I mean,
I was thinking maybe.
It's an outside
23 or
date.
something, but-
but we can revisit it if again, we're getting.
And then districts to be reduced. Could you
So-
explain that?
Yeah, so this was the Town and Country Overlay District. So again, I want another year. I'd like to move that to 2021, which again is the last year. Again, the master plan is supposed to be adopted in 2022.
And what is the note about Warwin and Quidnet?
Those are part of the areas that, again, those are some of the anomalies we're talking
Okay,
about.
that's under, I was the next item said western end, and I was just confused where that was pointing.
Yeah.
So, okay.
No, this is where we have mainly town zoning districts in the
Yeah.
country overlay. And again, while when it couldn't stick out as, a mismatch, there's some other ones in there too. But basically, the goal is before we adopt a new master plan to have those fixed.
Right. And then next one is expanded districts, CDT, CI, CMI, CTEC, and CN.
Right, and again, I wanted to move that to 2021 to be consistent with the adoption of the new master plan in 2022. And a lot of those commercial districts are replacing RC, RC2. So again, it's consistent.
Yeah.
So do we need a motion to approve this?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. That was Nat and John. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question on this
Please,
now?
Steve.
Andrew, sewer master plan, are you basing that build out on the existing or the 2021 new date? Now that it's 2021, the new zones or the existing?
The existing.
So they're aware, and that's what I meant when I was talking about master planning, is that the community becomes aware that.
Yep.
But you're making them obviously aware, you're obviously making them aware that that will be changed.
Right.
For capacity, Kelson stuff.
Right.
Okay.
Some of that, it's a wash. Some of it is, most of it is less. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Because in general, these all require, bigger lot sizes, but the same overall density.
So budget, I think this is related to something that came up in NPEDC. Is that right, Andrew? Or you just wanted us to be aware of it?
I just wanted you to be aware of it so you had a general idea of what the budget was. If we are going to budget for future consultants or master plan related items, it's there so you have an idea of where it might fit in. Generally going to be in the professional services catalog or category. We are phasing out the yard sale professional services. That's gradually going over to town administration and their real estate specialist. Not that we're not helping, but we are not going to be needing that particular fund, but we might replace that with in the next budget cycle with master plan related professional services. I know for certain that we're going to need some level of consultants on this car limitation idea. I intend to get a legal request to the town manager, which at least outlines what home rule petitions and maybe federal laws or other things that we need to be changing. So we have a clear understanding of that.
Thank you very much. I wondered if you could, just so we keep our eye on the ball here, for the next cycle, for example, when you need to present a request related to the master planning, what time of year does that take place? Is that in the fall or not till January or?
Right, so the budget, so this would probably be a follow-up item at our September meeting.
Okay,
Because the budget comes together in basically, by the end of the fall, which then translates into, Article 10 or whatever it is.
right.
Did you want me to raise that, or did you discuss that?
I
At all?
forgot to, no, go ahead.
Okay.
Fritz wanted to come back to something. I jumped over other matters, so please
You want to do it
go
now?
ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I had just raised a question. From time to time, enforcement comes up. I know I'd raised a couple of questions. Would you consider the possibility of having, let's say, a quarterly enforcement report where it could be, and I don't know how many items there are, so I don't want to have something that takes up an hour, but given whatever's the appropriate amount of time, That could either be specific as to properties or generally as to properties. We've had so many, these number of complaints, this is how they got resolved. Or if there is, or we had so many complaints and they were resolved, but you have a couple of specific ones where some specific enforcement action is being taken or is not being taken, and it might be a more high-profile kind of thing, just simply to report it to us so that we kind of know what's going on.
And also, in that regard, if there's anything that you see out of that that should be a possible bylaw remedy, like if there's any kind of chronic ambiguity or something that might have, so feel free to build off that in addition, if you, or if Paul has anything like that he'd want to add to.
I will let you know this is an active topic right now. And the topic is more comprehensive reporting and about where all these matters stand. So it's something that once we get that more, I mean, I have no problem sharing that with you. It's public information. There's not a problem with that. And
For me, it was a way of kind of stimulating that. It sounds like it's already
it is
stimulated.
it definitely is, because there have been ongoing questions about
Okay.
this, and
So
better,
it might be helpful. That could be even maybe more summary,
Yep.
but just so that we kind of have some feeling for what's going on.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're down to our last item, EnerGov update.
So I was hoping Holly was going to be here tonight because she's really a champion of this. Unfortunately, she was ill today and called in sick. But I can tell you that they are testing the modules right now. I know that HDC Kathy was working on that. So I'm hopeful that is moving forward. It's something we're definitely supportive of. I can't do it outside of the town. It's part of a town grant to move this forward, and it's integrated within the town. I see the HDC and the building department sort of moving pretty quickly.
So that's for electronic permitting?
Yes.
And things like that?
Yep. And that's that particular program. Holly is familiar with that. She worked with that in South Carolina in her job before. She was a big, why don't we have that? I want it, Brendan, our wiring inspector, the same, was like, I'm going to do my own program. So again, they want this to move forward. So it's
We know it's challenging to do that, especially if it's somebody else's call about how fast and when and all that. But thank you for letting us know. The other thing I just wanted to mention that came up when John and I met with Andrew, it was right after the NPDC meeting, so the whole discussion about having enhanced communication was kind of related to it, but we talked about things like developing frequently asked questions list or other ideas that it could really enhance the electronic presence and help people know more what's going on. So there may be other things once this EnerGov thing gets completed that we may want to think about in terms of the comp plan, master plan. We're going to have to be doing more of that anyway. So just wanted people to know that the staff was open to those suggestions, and if others have ideas. It's such a complex world we're in now, and how people want information varies so much and what their capacity is. But I think basic, humble stuff like frequently asked questions can really be worthwhile. So I just would want you to know if you're having people ask you questions or things like that, it might be worth emailing to you, Andrew, is that right?
Sure.
Just to kind of help him pull together a list that when you get an intern or have other help, or if it ever slows down.
fit it in here, there.
Okay, so.
And just to have it on the record, I did bring this up at the NPECD, and I don't know if it was met with just overwhelming support, but the idea of potentially in the future looking for maybe a full-time communications position for someone that really looks at and views social media, how they can respond, going to the department heads to get the answers of the frequently asked questions, and just, having just a more regularly updated position. I know a lot of other towns have it. I know colleges now are, and I know this from a personal experience, my niece was hired by NJIT to just do that. So institutions are, they realize how important social media is, and having answers, not just on the spot, but to be responded to, so it doesn't just fester and become a mind of its own, and then you get support from other people and commenting on things that they don't really know anything about, and it could have been a question that was answered right away. Anyway, I think that's important, and maybe it needs to be explored at a later time, but I think starting with frequently asked questions is something that's going to drastically help. But
And to go along with that, John, I think that will help in the general knowledge of what goes on here, and, as far as the zoning changes historically and what we're looking for in the future, and as far as the rotaries and those improvements. I mean, all that can be tied together as basically an educational tool for the community, and I think it's a good idea. I just don't know how to.
Libby knows about this. I talked to her actually today about, after our little meeting, and asked her about this with Florencia, sort of finding a way to enhance this one person's little job. Right. It's like we hired a guy from the Cape Cod Times at the steamship, Sean Driscoll. This guy's, but he's really good at this. Like, he was already sort of doing it. You got to be kind of a junkie to do this. I mean, you can't just say, I'm going to be the internet guy. You're not doing this all the time. And being able to ask, okay, somebody writes something on Facebook that says something about us, zoning. We changed the zoning on Hooper Farm Road, for example, which was said right in this room at that microphone. And not true. But how do you respond professionally as a staff person? You can't just get into an argument. You have to do it right. And that's, it's going to happen. It's happening. You found this out in San Francisco, right, Andrew, that they're doing this? Everybody is.
Places are employing these.
Because it's in our best interest, regardless whether it's an issue that we agree on or not. It's true.
Andrew, does high school kids here, is it possible that they can do work study kind of thing? That
They're into that stuff.
Yeah.
Service to graduate.
Yeah.
They need
I think-
20 hours.
yeah. I think they
great
just have to
idea.
be careful not to give their own opinions about something. There's going to be a certain protocol of questions being asked to go to the proper heads, and obviously Andrew, is this something, and then get the response. But to just monitor that, see that, and then address it and follow up on it is going to be big.
It might even be like a semi-part-time thing to start, and it might even be that there's a couple of smaller departments that it doesn't, and it worked through somehow. You mentioned speaking to Libby, it might be something that works through town admin, but it's a service provided to different departments. And just to clarify my earlier comment about the planning board has a marketing problem, this is exactly what I was thinking.
No,
It's not
100%.
anything we're not,
Nailed it.
it's not necessarily doing something, you gotta get the word out and inform people so they can make an informed decision versus not having information to make decisions about, or getting information that's incorrect or one-off. And it's just a whole nother area of responsibility that comes with growing pains. I mean, it's just part of the process, so.
And
I think-
social change
sorry.
too. Go ahead, John.
No, I think a lot of the issues come about before our special town meeting, before our annual town meeting. So, I think there's a need for a full-time position. However, before we get into that and budgetary and benefits, things like that, it might be that we just, really focus on the month before. So that's when all the questions come up and the issues. And I really firmly believe that if some of the questions were asked and answered, leading up to the town meeting, certain things that did not pass, maybe losing by 16 votes, would have been clarified and they would have passed. Because they, at voting poll, at the polls.
ballots, yeah.
Because we did slightly pass them at the planning board, but I think by keeping that momentum going, they would have succeeded at the polls.
Okay, so our next,
So maybe those public hearing announcements should go on Facebook. The ones we were talking about earlier, you know?
You're talking about the butters notice thing.
Yeah. Well, somebody tells somebody, hey. this
Might get too many people here.
well,
To go to the high school.
we're gonna leave that for a subsequent report, but reminder, our next meeting is July the 8th.
Yeah.
So, okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, so moved.
Okay,
Thank you, Judith.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Got us all, kept us on track.